The ice-rimmed courtyard of Winterfell lay silent in the hush before dawn, save for the brittle sigh of frost-touched banners and the faint rasp of a lone direwolf's breath. Bran Stark felt their pulse in his bones. The weirwood's reddened leaves quivered in a wind too hushed for mortal ears. Yet within their whisper Bran heard time itself uncoil. He pressed a trembling hand to the bone-white trunk, the faces carved in its bark seeming to stir and kindle as his mind slid into the shadow between heartbeats. Cold flooded him. Snow-laden branches blurred to a lattice of ghost-white veins, and the world bent sideways, then opened vast, green, and endless, like roots burrowing through every age at once. He sank deeper, guided by the raven-eyed presence that had once been Brynden Rivers and was now something larger, older, tireless. "Remember the names of storms," the three-eyed crow had said. "Storms are wounds in time. Touch one at the wrong moment and the world will bleed forever." Yet Bran was tired of caution. Summer's fur still smelled of smoked venison where the dire wolf dozed at his feet, but Bran's own hunger was fiercer, the hunger to undo the ruin of his house. Robb's crown lay rotting beneath a fry cloak. Arya was lost to rumor and dust. His mother's scream still echoed in the cold hall of his dreams. If a storm must break, let it break where it once began. He reached. Green light drowned him. He saw a pale red sky over King's Landing, tasted the metallic sting of wildfire seeping through stone, heard the bells of madness toll beneath the weight of a crown forged in paranoia. Somewhere a king, gaunt, trembling, eyes aflame with secrets, barked orders to unseen pyromancers. Bran's breath snagged in his throat. This was Aerys too, the last Targaryen to sit upon the Iron Throne, the man whose fear had birthed the rebellion that tore Westeros apart. Here lay the root of every sorrow that had followed. "Warn him," Brynden Rivers whispered, though his voice was ragged with uncertainty. "But heed the cost." Bran's resolve hardened. He focused, weaving words from mist and memory, a disembodied murmur carrying tidings of treason, whispers behind the throne that smelled of roses and rebellion. He spoke of Baratheon storm clouds gathering in the west, of a wolf lord and a lion kingmaker, of a prince whose harp might yet ignite a kingdom. And across the green dream, the Mad King's eyes widened. "Traitors!" Aerys hissed aloud, though no mortal answered. The small council chamber flickered, torches guttering as if doused by spirits. "Even the stones conspire." He clawed at his beard, nails drawing blood, the weeping red mixing with slaver froth at his lips. Those near him recoiled, and Bran felt their terror like a distant drumbeat. Grand Maester Pycelle fumbling vials of humors, Lord Cannington stiff as iron, Carlton Chelstead clutching forbidden parchments. Scrolls snapped like dry leaves beneath Aerys' boots as he lurched toward the throne room, eyes wild for enemies only he could see. Each stride echoed with prophecy misheard. Bran retreated in sudden horror. He felt the weirwood's pulse chant up, up, urging him to the safe shallows of the present. But fear had already seated itself in the Mad King's marrow. Whatever mercy might have remained there shriveled like fruit in a kiln. Bran's warning, meant to avert catastrophe, had instead twisted into a spur that drove Aerys deeper into his own flames. Time reknit around Bran in stuttering fragments, Theon's sharp laugh echoing from years ago, Maester Luwin's quill-scratching parchment, the scent of Baratheon banners charred at the trident. Then the courtyard returned, gray as dawn's steel. Bran collapsed at the weirwood's base, chest heaving, pupils blown wide as moon-sized pools. Summer nosed his cheek, whining. Blood trickled from Bran's nose. He wiped it away with a shaking thumb and stared at the rust-colored smear. I only warned him, he wanted to scream, but the roots had shown him enough to guess what seed he'd planted. Already, across leagues and years, wildfire casks were being ordered in secret. Silent sisters in King's Landing would soon run out of linen to wrap charred corpses, and the sound of every pyre would echo like a bitter bell through Westeros's future. Through Robb's foolhardy march, through a red wedding, through a long night only dragons could thaw. Bran had meant to save them. Instead, he had stoked the very blaze that would burn them all. King's Landing that same dawn wore a gray stole of mist. From Maegor's holdfast, Rhaella Targaryen watched gulls wheel above the Blackwater, though she scarcely saw them. Grey Aerys Dane, her handmaid, stood silent at her shoulder, eyes darting between the queen's wan face and the corridor beyond, where armored men paced like caged hounds. The court's temper had curdled in recent moons. Every whisper carried the tang of treason. Inside the throne room, Grand Maester Pycelle's trembling baritone broke the hush. "Your Grace, perhaps if we reread Lord Jon Arryn's letters." "Burn them," Aerys croaked, voice raw. "Burn his name from the parchment, and his bones after mine dragons swallow him." He paced beneath the Iron Throne's shadow, feet crunching on shards of broken mirror. He had demanded every reflective surface in the red keep be shattered that morn. Mirrors, he claimed, were traitors that bent light into lies. Now hammered glass glittered like frozen tears across the marble floor. Aerys halted, nostrils flaring. Somewhere behind him, a torch hissed. He turned on Pycelle. "The fire speaks," he rasped. "Have you never listened, Maester? It sings of wolves and stags and lions circling the dragon's nest. And of a rose. Oh, the sweet stink of rose, blooming where it should not. Tell me, do roses burn as brightly as men?" Pycelle swallowed. "My king, rumor is wind. If we grant audience to disquiet, we risk." "Silence," Aerys screeched. He lifted a hand, fingers crooked like talons. "The fire warned me. Voices from beyond the centuries cry out. Even the old gods shudder." His gaze drifted, pupil sparking. "Who are you to question flame?" Chelstead, pale beneath his flower dust hair, stepped forward. "My liege, we beg you consider." Crack. A gauntlet fist struck his cheek. Ser Jonathan Darry's armored knuckles. Chelstead reeled, blood painting the floor. The king smiled, teeth red. "Any man who doubts my vigilance is a traitor in seed and in sap," Aerys declared. "Fetch the pyromancers. King's Landing shall become a crown of fire, every street a tongue of dragon flame. Let traitors learn that treason has but one reward." His words lived and died in the hush, yet their echo raced down corridors and seeped beneath doors, carrying dread the way wildfire seeped through stonework. Pycelle closed his eyes, praying mute. Somewhere, a raven shrieked against its cage. Far to the south, Rhaegar Targaryen returned to the fortress of Summerhall with harp in hand and heart heavy as a marble tomb. Summerhall's ruins lay black and silent beneath a canopy of swaying grass, but Rhaegar came often to play where his grandfather had perished in dragon dreams. He believed music could coax truth from ash, though today no melody would come. Reports from the capital clawed at him. His father had dismissed good men, elevated flatterers, whispered to shadows. Ravens spoke of new stocks of wildfire arriving by night. The court was sickening, and the kingdom with it. He knelt amid the overgrown throne room where summer flowers sprouted between charred stones, and plucked a mournful cord. Yet even the cord felt brittle like a cracked eggshell. Turning, he half expected to see a ghost behind him. Perhaps the boy Bran, brown hair flecked with snow, standing at the edge of his vision. Rhaegar had dreamed such a child. Stern-eyed, old beyond his years, warning of storms. But only wind stirred. He closed his eyes, let his fingers drift. The string hum shimmered like distant thunder. If dragons are born again, the prophecy whispered, they must first drink from the river of grief. Rhaegar wondered if that river began in his father's veins. A footstep crunched nearby. Arthur Dane, Sword of the Morning, waited at the archway, dawn cradled against one shoulder. "Your Highness," he said softly. "Another raven. Lord Tywin has resigned the handship." Rhaegar's stomach nodded. "Did he say why?" "He claimed ill health," Arthur answered, though his tone made plain the lie. "In truth, I think he fears the fire more than the throne now." Rhaegar rose, harp echo fading among burned rafters. He looked to the east, where the sun bled pink across clouds. "If the hand flees," he murmured, "the realm will follow. My father builds a pyre to light his coronation anew, but the smoke may blind every man who might quench it." Arthur's gaze lingered on dawn's mirrored edge. "And what of the song you sought here?" Rhaegar smoothed the harp strings. "Songs cannot douse wildfire," he said. "Yet perhaps they can warm hearts before they burn." He turned toward King's Landing, dread twisting inside him like a newborn serpent. He could feel the world's breath quicken, kingdom poised on a cusp of flame, and somewhere, in quiet snowbound winter, a boy reached again for a tree that bled red leaves and secrets, desperate to mend what could not be mended. In Winterfell's rookery, a white raven flapped its moon-pale wings, scattering droppings across maester scrolls. Old Nan had come to mend torn tabards but paused when she saw Bran seated in the high window, legs dangling like limp marionettes. "You've been at secrets, little lord," she muttered, though her voice quavered with an old woman's fear. Bran's eyes, gray and wide, seemed to look through stone and skin both. He said nothing. Nan set her sewing aside, folds of gray cloak pooling at her feet. "The trees talk, aye," she whispered, "but they must not be tricked into singing songs of fire. Fire's a hungry thing. Once it hears its name, it never stops calling." Bran's lips parted, but the language that shivered there was older than men, older than giants or children of the forest. He tasted sap and snow and ashes and blood, and he understood now why Bloodraven's sockets had wept red sap when he spoke of doom. "No more," Bran croaked, voice raw. "I won't speak again, but vows mean little to time. Already, the green afterimage of Aerys's burning throne haunted the corners of his sight. He feared to blink lest the vision deepen, lest he be dragged once more into the wound he'd opened. Yet even silence cannot unmake an echo. In King's Landing, the echo had grown claws. Lord Carlton Chelsted died first. 7 days after Aerys's new edict, black-cloaked knights found him in the royal library, fingers blistered by wildfire spill, scrolls charred where they tried to douse smoldering lampwicks. Rumor said he'd confronted the king, pleading that the pyromancer's vaults be sealed. But the king had decreed otherwise. The crown's alchemists dragged Chelsted through the streets at dusk, torches hissing. When the pyre finally took him, his screams mingled with the caw of crows perched on the sept's broken gargoyles. That night, green flames stained the clouds above the Red Keep, and King's Landing whispered of ghosts with emerald eyes. Lord Connington drank himself ill at Griffin's Roost, writing letters in a shaky hand that never reached their recipients. Meanwhile, ravens born from Casterly Rock carried tales of Lord Tywin's armies mustering, ostensibly against raiders in the Westerlands, though few believed the lie. And somewhere in Dorne's scented heat, Prince Doran marveled at tidings of wildfire shipments tripling along the Rose Road, each parchment smelling faintly of pine and pitch, as if the message itself might ignite. The realm trembled under the weight of secrets, but the king's laughter rang shriller each day. He took to pacing the throne room at midnight, barefoot among iron blades, muttering of songs in the stone and children who walked the windroads. Ser Barristan Selmy alone dared stand vigil, dawn-pale hair silvered in torchlight, wondering if the crown he protected rested now upon a pyre rather than a brow. Winter deepened. At Winterfell, Bran's dreams turned fevered. Wolves ran through snowdrifts blackened by ash. An eagle with 3 heads circled a tower of wildfire green ice, and always the whisper, "Build no more bridges of words. The river will flood." Brynden Rivers visited him in midnight quiet, his corpse-white face gleaming with root-like veins. "You have walked too far, too young," he murmured, "and left footprints in the snow of yesteryear. Those who come after will see them, and in their seeing, stumble." Bran's throat tightened. "I wanted to save them." "To save is to choose what burns," the crow replied. "Better sometimes to let the forest find its own shape." But Bran remembered Rickon's howl when he learned of Robb's fate, remembered his mother's eyes open but unseeing on the twins' stone floor. If the old gods would not mend such wounds, he would. Yet a seed of doubt sprouted. Every choice in time cast shadows across worlds. Already he felt the past twisting into shapes unlike the tales old men had told. A tapestry unraveling, threads rewoven with jagged haste. If Rhaegar turned upon his father too soon, if Tywin's swords moved in paranoia rather than ambition, What new horror might stride from the flame? The forest's silence offered no answer. Only the slow drip of sap, the heartbeat of seasons turning. Bran bowed his head. "I will watch," he said at last, "but I will not speak again." Rivers nodded, sorrow or relief, Bran could not tell. But in King's Landing, the fire had learned to speak for itself. The pyromancer Rossart stood before the Iron Throne, saffron robes singed at the hem, speaking of hidden caches and river tunnels primed to flood with green death at a single bell's ring. He described jars nested like eggs beneath flea bottom, casks buried in the crypts of Maegor's Holdfast, wildfire-soaked rags stashed in the bellies of rotted fisher skiffs tied along the Blackwater. Aerys listened, lips peeled back. "To be the dragon reborn?" he whispered. "One must crack the shell of mortal treachery." Rossart bowed low, though fierce sweat shone at his hairline. "Dragonfire majesty, but cast in mortal hands. You need only the word to ignite righteousness." The king's gaze drifted beyond, perhaps, to a whisper seated by a boy's half-plea across time. Baratheon, the whisper had said, Stark, Lannister, Tyrell, names swirling into prophecy. In Aerys' mind, they had become phantoms with blades of mist. "Burn them all," he murmured. "This time the realm will learn." Those words leaked like poison through the stones. By dusk, even the rats knew them. At Storm's End, Lord Steffan Baratheon frowned over a wax-sealed raven scroll bearing the sigil of a crowned skull. Whatever the Mad King plotted, fire bore its thesis. He called for Robert, his eldest son, too loud and brash to heed caution, and for Stannis, thinner and sterner, who smelled treason in every silence. Renly toddled about chasing a striped cat's tail, heedless of the pall gathering. Steffan's brow furrowed deeper. "If fire is coming," he told his sons, "we must quench it at the source." But Robert laughed, clasping his father's shoulder. "Then let us ride," he said, "and drown King's Landing in storm-born steel." Stannis's glance held worry, but he nodded. Far north, Eddard Stark tightened his cloak against the cold, reading the same dread in a raven's black eye. In Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister stared at wildfire tallies and saw a monarch shaping apocalypse instead of realm. Each lord felt the realm's pulse quicken, a heartbeat racing toward the fever crest. And in each mind echoed the same thought: the king must be stopped. Yet none grasped that the spark had come not from Aerys alone, but from a boy who dreamed too far. When Rhaegar at last crossed the King's Road and rode through the Dragon Gate, he found the city cloaked in soot-tainted fog. Smokestacks of unseen fires painted the sky greenish black.
Folk whispered, huddled at doorways.
Children's songs replaced dragons with hoarse ravens counting ashes. Ser Arthur Dayne dismounted behind him, dawn flashing in half-light. Prince Lewin Martell removed his helm, sweat plastering dark curls to his brow. Each man smelled thunder, though the sky was clear. Rhaegar sought his father in the throne room, but found only Rossart and flames. Pyromancers moved like pale bees, inscribing chalk circles and insidious runes upon the floor. Rossart greeted him with an obsequious smile. "The king prepares a gift for traitors, your highness," he said. "Where is my father?" Rhaegar's voice cracked. "In Maegor's Holdfast," Rossart answered, writing history in wildfire. Cold horror seeped into Rhaegar's marrow. He turned on a heel, storming toward the Holdfast's bronze doors. Arthur followed, hand on dawn, Lewin on his spear. In the courtyard, ravens lifted in a black torrent above the dragon pit's shattered dome. Within the Holdfast's heart, they found Aerys hunched over parchment, fingers black with ink and scorch. He looked up, eyes swirling with feverish triumph. "My son," he rasped, "you have returned in time to witness absolution. The realm will be cleansed in dragonfire, and from ash we shall rise pure." Rhaegar's breath fled him. "Father, this is madness. Release the pyromancers. Destroy the stores." "Madness," Aerys laughed, thin, cracked. "Mad are those who dream treason and think the flames blind. I have seen Baratheon banners in my sleep, lions licking their chops, wolves baying for Targaryen blood. But fire sees all. Fire protects. Rhaegar stepped forward, eyes shining.
No prophecy demands slaughter.
Listen to me. There is still time. But Aerys recoiled, clutching a dagger gilded to resemble a dragon's fang. Are you with them? He hissed. A son forged in song. Come to slide a harp string twixt my ribs? Arthur drew Dawn a handspan. Lewin braced his spear. Guards at the walls shifted, uncertain which duty outweighed fear. Rhaegar raised empty palms. No, father, he whispered. I came to save you. Yet some part of him realized Bran's whisper had already devoured the man Aerys once was. There remained only the husk, animated by Wildfire's promise. The dagger flashed. Arthur stepped between, Dawn catching the blade, sparks spitting. Guards lunged. Lewin parried one spear, but another struck his shoulder. The chamber exploded into chaos. Steel on marble, shouts echoing. Rhaegar shouted for calm, but each clang drowned him. Aerys' laughter rose above noise. Burn them all, he shrieked. Burn them. And somewhere beneath the keep, a bellsman's hand trembled upon a rope slick with tallow, waiting for the signal to ring doom. Bran saw none of this, yet dreamed all of it. In his unconscious mind, wildfire blossoms burst across cobblestones. Boys whose faces he knew only by song choked on green flame. A queen wailed in birthing chambers swallowed by smoke. He woke screaming. Snow swirled beyond the shutters, but Bran felt only heat. He pressed fists to his eyes, trying to unsee. No more bridges of words, the crow had warned. But bridges had already been crossed, and the river raged. Outside Winterfell's walls, the wind carried distant wolf howls. Arrhythmic, mournful, as if the pack sensed some great hunt had begun. Bran thrust the blanket aside, crawled to the window ledge. Below, the godswood stood hushed, branches black against fresh snow. Yet the weirwood's face seemed changed, mouth twisted, weeping sap that steamed upon the bark. He realized then Hat the tree, an anchor through ages, was keening for what had been ripped from the tapestry. He bowed his head and wept. Not even a Stark's pride could staunch that grief. For he understood at last. A warning may steer fate, but fate is a many-headed beast. Cleave one head, and others grow hungrier in its place. At Riverrun, Hoster Tully contemplated marriage pacts with a shaking hand, ink pooling on vellum. He'd intended to wed his eldest to the stag or lion, but rumor of the king's madness spread like candlefire. If the realm burned, alliances mattered little. He thought of his daughters, of a son too young to command rivers yet, and prayed to gods old and new. In the Reach, Mace Tyrell hosted tourneys to distract his bannermen. Yet behind every plume of festival smoke lurked dread of wildfire. Even the plump lord's laughter faltered when quiet ravens spoke of dragonflame. The realm, once a quilt of rival houses bound by brittle threads, now fluttered at the brink of conflagration. And in the skies above the trident, crows circled, black as heralds of war. But it was in the damp, torchlit tunnels beneath the red keep that history bent anew. Jaime Lannister, barely a man and fresh-minted Kingsguard, stumbled upon pyromancers stacking barrels in a chamber whose walls dripped sweat from the Blackwater's sigh. He tasted resin on the air, heard Rossart chanting. Jaime's knuckles tightened on his sword. Wildfire sloshed inside earthen jars, each sealed with chalk glyphs older than Valyria. The pyromancers spoke of trigger lines linking every barrel to the bells. When the warning rang, burn them all, King's Landing would ignite in a saintly funeral pyre. Jaime fled up twisting stairs until he burst into the White Sword Tower, breath ragged. Ser Gerald Hightower listened, stone-faced, and in that silence Jaime weighed oaths, to crown, to realm, to life itself. The sun rose over a kingdom trembling on the cusp of nightmares, storms marshalling at storm's end, dragons coiling within black crypts of prophecy, and in Winterfell a crippled boy staring at his hands as if they were daggers. Far beyond sight, the heart tree whispered, remember the names of storms, though its leaves now bled flame instead of frost. And in King's Landing, a mad king stood upon a scaffolding of his own terror, matches poised, mouth open in a hymn only he could hear. History waited, breath held, for which spark would fall first. Bran lay awake beneath furs heavy as regret, listening to the silence between snowflakes. The fire in his chambers burned low, embers pulsing faintly, like the heartbeat of a dying dream. He felt time thrumming beneath the world, taut as a bowstring drawn too far. I warned him, Bran thought, and so I kindled the fire that burns the future. Yet deep within him, a stubborn seed stirred. Perhaps fire must burn before new seeds can sprout. Perhaps ashes might yet feed the soil of a different dawn. But such hope was slender as a raven's feather on a storm's breath. He closed his eyes and felt the weirwood's roots stir beneath the snow, searching out the warmth of buried stories yet untold. The storm had only just begun. A sullen hush draped King's Landing in the hours before dawn, as though the ancient city held its breath for judgment. In Maegor's holdfast, candles guttered in cressets along a marble corridor, their flames twitching beneath invisible drafts that reeked of pitch. Ser Jaime Lannister, golden and uneasy in milk-white mail, paused before a thick oaken door banded in iron. Beyond it, the guttural chorus of pyromancers chanting arcane syllables throbbed against the stone, punctuated by the soft cluck of earthen jars shifting in straw. He had counted 73 casks here already, each swaddled like a babe in linen steeped in fragrant oils. More arrived every hour. He raked a hand through molten hair and exhaled. Oaths weighed upon him like shackles, to defend the king, to guard the realm, to keep his own honor unsullied. Yet the realm and king, were they still one? Or had Aerys severed that bond with each fresh whisper of green doom? The thought curdled Jaime's stomach, for he had always liked clear certainties. A tourney list, a joust, a woman's smile, a foe's defeat. Treason, though war mirrored faces, and in each he glimpsed himself. Footsteps clanged at the far end of the hall. Ser Barristan Selmy emerged from shadow, visor raised. Moonlight silvered the rivets on his gauntlets, and sorrow lay behind his eyes like winter ice. "Is it true?" Selmy asked, voice little louder than the rustle of a raven's wing. "Have they filled the vaults beneath Visenya's hill?" Jaime nodded once. "Rossart praises the king for vision. Another 100 barrels came by river after midnight. If they keep at it, King's Landing will sit atop a sea of wildfire." Selmy's jaw tensed. A sword protects, it does not immolate. He touched the pommel engraved with a pale lily, as though seeking guidance from steel. "I have sworn my life to Aerys, yet if he means to burn 1,000,000 innocents..." The words died unfinished. Honor warred with the impossible. Jaime felt it too, an iron taste at the back of his tongue. Somewhere deep inside, a young lion's pride snarled that he could seize destiny with a single swift stroke. Yet each time that spark flared, the ghost of his father's cold gaze doused it. Choose wrongly, and the name Lannister might pass into ruin. A distant bell tolled 6 notes, dawn's first call. Jaime pictured the ropes that linked bell clappers to hidden fuses, strands of jute soaked in oil. One ring, if Rossart so desired, and every cache might blossom at once. He met Selmy's gaze. "We may be Kingsguard," he murmured, "but we are not blind." Selmy's shoulders seemed to sag beneath invisible armor. "Nor cowards. If the realm must be saved from the very man we swore to shield, we shall need courage greater than vows." He stepped closer. "I will see Prince Rhaegar. Stay your hand until then." Jaime watched the old knight depart, back rigid with conviction. Courage, Jaime mused, was a blade with 2 edges. Salvation on one, damnation on the other. Which edge awaited him? In a scoured chamber atop the Tower of the Hand, Tywin Lannister knelt before a mahogany chest the size of a cradle. 3 thick seals of crimson wax banded its lid. A 4th bore his signet, the roaring lion in dark relief. Casterly Rock's Marshal, Ser Kevan Lannister, stood nearby, arms crossed. 6,000 armored men will match north of the Mander by the fortnight, Kevan reported. "I left instructions that no banner be unfurled until word reaches them." Tywin did not reply at once. He pried a thin silver blade beneath the wax, popped the first seal, then the next. Inside the chest lay scrolls. Inventories, ledgers, letters signed by lesser lords swearing fealty. Promises no parchment could enforce if the world burned. Beneath them, hidden in a wood-lined recess, jutted the hilt of Valyrian steel. It would disgrace the realm, Tywin said at length, if rebellion carried the flighty name of romance. Baratheon lusting after Stark's sister, songs of roses and honor, childish tales. He lifted the blade, a slender long sword dark as smoke and etched with crimson waves. Steel decides truth, not song. Kevan eyed the weapon. Bright Roar was lost in Valyria. What is this? A sword forged for a secret, Tywin answered. When the moment comes, the lion's roar will not be drowned by wildfire. He turned, shadows sheathing half his face. Chandler smoke drifted between them. Send ravens to Lord Aaron. Remind him the Vale's future lies with those who act, not dream. And dispatch riders to Riverrun. Hoster Tully keeps 1 foot in every river. If he senses which tide strengthens, he'll cast in with us. Kevan inclined his head. And the king? Tywin slid the sword into a plain leather scabbard. Madness cannot be reasoned with, he said, but it can be ended. Far across whispering fields, dawn leaked through the orange groves of Dorne, painting dew-pearled blossoms in wine-red hues. In the water gardens, sparrowhawk fountains cast silver arcs that splintered the newborn sun. Prince Doran Martell, wrapped in a white cloak against the chill, studied a courier scroll bound with the sigil of a crowned skull. News of wildfire reached even Sunspear. Shipments tenfold previous tallies. Unsleeping kills churning resinous sludge under the Red Keep. His knuckles whitened around the parchment. The Mad King's fire had already charred Martell hearts. Elaya's pleas echoed in his memory. If Aerys stoked further chaos, Dorne's children might feed his pyre. Oberyn Martell approached, sun-kissed and sharp-eyed, long spear cast aside in favor of a goblet of sweet green wine. "Brother," he drawled, "our father taught us that when vipers strike, they strike swift. Yet you nurse this venomous scroll like a wet nurse with a babe." Doran's answer was soft. "Rumor calls Aerys deranged. Not rumor now. Proof." He gestured at the Blackwater's distant smudge on the parchment map. "If wildfire spills across King's Landing, 100,000 screams will ride the wind. Will Dorne answer with silence?" Oberyn swirled his wine. "When a fire rages out of control, one may choke it with sand or feed it with oil. I know which choice would please my spear." His smile cut like glass. Doran closed his eyes, feeling swell and ebb of warm desert breeze. Prophecy haunted his house too. Elaya's babes, dragons promised, songs of ice and fire. Yet prophecy offered riddles, not guidance. Mortal men must make mortal choices. He opened his eyes. "Ready the sandship," he murmured. "If the mountain scorches the capital, Dorne will neither hide nor applaud. We shall guard those who flee and slay those who burn." Oberyn's grin widened. A dance of spears among screaming lions and pyromancers. Mother above, the songs it would spawn. "Songs?" Doran muttered. "I tire of songs. Let deeds shape the dawn." Within the crown of Winterfell's broken towers, Bran Stark lay swaddled in furs, yet cold gnawed at bone and spirit. The faintest crackle from the hearth could not banish the dreamscapes coiled behind his eyes. Green mazes of time where wildfire petals bloomed and turned to ash upon a babe's lips. He felt half awake, half entangled in roots that burrowed beneath every tragedy. The door creaked. Mira Reed padded across reed-woven rushes, her cheeks wind-pink. "You did not come to break fast," she said, settling on a stool beside him. "Jojen worries." Bran's gaze drifted. "Jojen sees paths," he whispered, "but I become them." Mira's hand clasped his wrist, thumb brushing the faint pulse. "Tell me," he shuddered. "I touched too far. I warned the Mad King. And now, everything staggers. Words spilled like shattered raven's eggs, slick and raw." He spoke of bells rigged to fire, of a silver prince grappling with fate, of a city poised to martyr itself in green flame. Mira's lips parted. She had heard his tales of time-spanning vision, but this confession trembled with tangible dread. Can you mend what you broke? Perhaps. Bran's pupils widened as though he stared through her into unseen epochs. But every new thread I tug frays the cloth somewhere else. Mira squeezed his hand. Then do not tug. Hold firm. Watch until the weave reveals its own pattern. Bran turned to the window. Crows cawed upon ancient battlements, black against scudding clouds. Somewhere below, young Rickon chased shaggy dogs wagging tail, shrieking laughter. Innocence still survived in pockets of frost, fragile, precious. Bran swallowed. I will watch, he echoed, though resolve tasted like sorrow. But if snow wolves howl for fire's undoing, I may howl with them. On the King's Road's wide expanse 30 leagues north of the capital, Robert Baratheon reined his black stallion atop a hill crest. A cavalcade of iron-shod hoofs thundered behind. 200 Stormlanders, raw-boned and eager, banners streaming the crowned stag upon gold. Beside Robert, Lord John Cunnington rode with sober mien, red gold hair damp with sweat despite crisp dawn air. Below, the distant sprawl of King's Landing shimmered like tarnished coin in thin morning haze. Black smoke coiled from dozens of chimneys. Above them, the dragon pit's jagged silhouette clawed at the sky like a dead beast. Robert breathed deep. 7 hells, Connie. Smells like someone's roasting half the realm. Cunnington's frown deepened. Reports claim wildfire furnaces never cool now. Pyromancers work day and night. He tugged his gloves. We must tread carefully. Robert barked a laugh that startled the vanguard. Care? When a mad king loosens flame upon his own, the stag charges or the forest burns. He hefted his warhammer, wrought with a leaping stag on its twin ram's head faces. We'll pound sense into the Red Keep's walls. A gust fluttered Robert's sable cloak. Cunnington leaned close. Listen, Houses Stark and Arryn gather strength. Lord Tywin may march. If you strike before they join, you risk standing alone. Alone? Robert's blue eyes gleamed, half fury, half exhilaration. I have the storm at my back, and I have this. He patted the hammer's steel. If Aerys chooses fire, I'll gift him thunder. Cunnington opened his mouth, but words fled when a raven darkened the sun overhead. Its caw cut the sky, then vanished southward, an omen perhaps of wings soon singed. In the Red Keep's solar drenched with gold glass light, Prince Rhaegar sat in a high-backed chair carved with twisting dragons, hands folded over the neck of his silver harp. Ser Arthur Dayne stood sentinel by the lattice window, Dawn's pale blade propped against his boot, while Ser Barristan Selmy, cloak white, eyes weary, paced the threshold. Rhaegar's voice floated like a minor chord. My father's mind splinters further each hour. He plucked a single string. It thrummed and died. If he rings the bells, the city will vanish in green dusk. Selmy halted. Then we must ensure the bells never ring. Dane inclined his head, sunlight glinting off violet eyes. Rossart controls the fuses, and Qyburn and Bellies. Cut their tongues, or drive steel through their hearts, and perhaps the city endures. Selmy grimaced. Kingsguard do not slay sworn servants on whispers. Was it whisper that scorched Summerhall? Dane asked. Or prophecy and folly? Rhaegar answered soft. Prophecy misread. He lifted his harp and began a lament older than the conquest, a melody of falling leaves in moonlit pools. Notes drifted across the chamber, settling on hearts like snow. Selmy closed his eyes, transported to cold forests. Dane's fingers flexed on Dawn's scabbard. When the final note faded, Rhaegar spoke. I would sooner break every string than see King's Landing burn. Yet to strike my father's pyromancers is treason. Selmy's lashes lifted. Treason in service of mercy may yet be honored. The door banged open. Jaime Lannister strode in, cloak swirling, gold hair bright as sunrise. My prince, he said, disregarding etiquette. Rossart prepares to test fuses at noon. He boasts the bells'll shake the 7 kingdoms with one tug. The room stilled. Dane's knuckles whitened. Rhaegar rose. Noon, he repeated, voice barely sound. Then we have ours. His gaze fell upon Selmy, upon Jaime, upon Dane. 3 white swords, 3 hearts. Aerys gave the Kingsguard to shield his flesh, Rhaegar murmured. Yet now the flesh of every man, woman, and child is threatened. Swear to me you will stop the bells. Selmy bowed, anguish etched across ageless features. Jaime's grin flashed wolfish. He had waited for permission buried beneath valor. Dane's nod was as grave as a sexton's toll. Then ride with me, Rhaegar whispered, and pray the gods forgive us. High in the rookery, Grand Maester Pycelle fumbled among parchment stacks. A fresh raven had arrived from Old Town, bearing the Citadel's crimson seal. He cracked wax, steeling himself. The letter called on him to confirm rumors. Wildfire hordes, alchemists' ascendants, the king's unstable humors. It cautioned that if madness reigned, the realm might seek counsel from chain-clad wisdom instead of swords. Pycelle's hand trembled. He had served 3 kings by bending like a reed to each new wind, but this gust smelled of charnel smoke. He slumped onto a stool, heart pounding. If he whispered the truth abroad, the pyromancers might feed him to the fire. If he remained silent, the blaze would swallow thousands. Ink-stained fingers reached for quill and scroll. Words scratched. To Lord Tyrell of Highgarden, with urgency, the quill paused. Could roses stem wildfire's tide? Could anything? He forced the question aside and wrote on. Better to carve order where he could, even if history judged his quavering pen unheroic. Below, the raven beat restless wings against its cage, as though sensing messages heavier than lead weighed its fate. Midday's glare poured upon the dragon-winged gargoyles crowning the red keep, bathing them in harsh white. Beneath, a narrow postern gate opened to a warren of torchlit tunnels cut into Aegon's high hill. Rossart glided along them, saffron robes swishing, green shadow dancing on damp walls from lantern fade. His lips mumbled formulae older than Undul's. Ahead, a thin line of jute dipped through a brass eyelet, winding deeper into bowels where barrels stacked 3 tall. He paused to inspect a cask. Tiny crystals of naphtha glimmered at the seam like emerald frost. Perfect, all perfect. Soon the king would anoint him hand for faith and foresight, and the world would drink dragonfire. A hush broke as steel whispered from leather. Rossart turned, blinking at the glare of dawn's pale edge held steady by Arthur Dane. Behind him loomed Jaime's golden smirk, while Selmy's measure-steady gaze burned sterner than any flame. "My lords," Rossart croaked. Jaime tilted his head. "We had questions about bells." Rossart's eyes darted toward the fuse. Dane followed the glance and, with one swift motion, sliced through rope. Fiber parted silently, dropping to damp stone. Rossart's mouth sagged. Selmy spoke, each word a verdict. "Ser Jaime will see to every bell tower. You will instruct your pyromancers to halt production and secure every cask." Rossart's tremulous smile curdled. "Treason." Dane stepped forward. There was a whir of crimson robe, a flash of silver, then stillness. Rossart's head thumped upon the tunnel floor and rolled to rest against a barrel, mouth frozen mid-curse. Green lantern light cast an eerie halo about blood pooling black. Jaime swallowed hard. Dane's expression was a funeral mask. Selmy exhaled. "No man is glad to slay unarmed foes," he murmured. "Yet better one than a city." They advanced. Jaime hacked at fuse after fuse, leaving coils of damp twine littering stone like shed snake skins. Dane marked casks with chalk runes that signaled harmlessness. Selmy watched each turn of the tunnel, dread coiled behind stern calm. Above, bells remained silent, unaware their tongues had been stilled. Outside, clouds thickened against a southern wind, as though the weather itself pondered changing allegiances. In a dim garret overlooking Flea Bottom, Varys the spider studied an astrolabe whose polished brass discs reflected his moon-pale brow. Little birds flitted unseen in the rafters, chittering of broken fuses, of Rossart slain. Varys tapped the astrolabe once. Wheels shifted, casting pinprick star shadows along the dusty wall. "So," he whispered to no one, "the prince dares a quiet coup." He considered the thousand-thread tapestry of plots his web spanned. Aerys' death by flame would have cleansed the bore. D for new players, perhaps too swiftly. Rhaegar's measured step might weave a subtler pattern, but still uncertain. Whose cause served the realm's best chance for survival against winter's long night? Prophecy offered myriad threads. Varys preferred certainties born of coin, blade, and secret. A soft knock. One of his little birds scuttled in, a ragged boy clutching a cracked clay jug. He handed Varys a scrap. "Lady went prepares a tourney." Another note spoke of Mace Tyrell's levy. Yet another of Balon Greyjoy's hunger for glory. Tide upon tide. Varys's lips pursed. Change swept the kingdoms. A spider could ride only so many currents. He folded the notes into a copper coffer, locked it, then whispered, "Send word to Illyrio across the narrow sea. Ask if the dragon hatchlings still nest in exile. Perhaps, in chaos, old blood could rise anew." The boy darted away. Varys turned back to the astrolabe, nudging one star disk. It slid to eclipse another. Shadows realigned, and in their merge he glimpsed faint shapes of yet unborn destinies coiling like smoke. Afternoon light slanted over the God's Wood of Winterfell, painting amber-rimmed shadows along the whispering leaves. Bran sat beneath the heart tree, eyes closed, breath slow. He felt the bark's ridges against his back, sap pulsing like distant drums. "See, but do not touch," he told himself. A river of images rippled beyond the dam of his will, each one clamoring for voice. And yet, from among them, a single vision pressed hardest. Jaime Lannister standing over Rossert's corpse, sword crimson-tipped. Bran's heart lurched. A new path. One he had not glimpsed before, or one born by his earlier meddling. He slipped briefly into green sight. A flash. The Lion of the Rock pacing a torchlit stair, voice raw with shock. Another flash. Rhaegar confronting Aerys, eyes aflame with grief. Bran jerked back to his body, chest heaving. These were mere moments, yet they left his head ringing. "Bran!" Rickon's small voice interrupted. The boy knelt, clutching a wooden practice sword. "Robb says supper soon." Bran forced a smile. "Go, little brother. I'll follow." Rickon scampered off. Bran rubbed his temples. The tapestry shifted faster with each passing breath. If Jaime had broken the fused lines, did it prevent the city's burning? Or would the king devise darker measures? Watch, Mira had urged. He would watch, but watchers often became witnesses, and witnesses' shoulders bore the weight of memory. Bran murmured a prayer to nameless forest spirits, begging that memory not prove heavier than fate. Dusk gathered purple on the horizon when Rhaegar entered the throne room. Torches sputtered in the massive iron sconces. A faint scent of resin hung beneath heavier aromas of unwashed bodies and stale rushes. Aerys lounged on the iron throne like a malevolent gargoyle, robes stained by grease and wine. "Father," Rhaegar called, voice as steady as harp string. "The pyromancers report sabotage. Rossart is dead." Aerys' eyes bulged. "Traitors multiply like flies in carrion." He leaned forward, hair lank. "Was it you who slew him, my golden songbird?" "Rossart conspired beyond reason," Rhaegar said carefully. "He risked the city. The city is sacrifice." Aerys shrieked, spittle flying. "Dragons rise only from funeral pyres. I will be reborn in flame, and you—" His words tangled into a rattling cough. When it passed, he glared. "You fear to leap into the fire. Coarson." Rhaegar's fists curled. "I fear for women and children who never chose your pyre." Aerys' laughter was jagged. "Then let them burn, and let new life rise free of treachery." Behind columns, for gold cloaks shifted, uncertain. Rhaegar sensed their unease. Loyalty to coin bent quicker than loyalty to throne. He stepped closer. "Give me command to secure the city. Let me prove the realm's love." "Secure," Aerys echoed like a raven mocking. "Yes, Secure the gates. Seal every exit. Let no rat escape the cleansing. And recall the bells. His gaze sharpened. Ring them now. Rhaegar's blood stilled. The bells. Ring them, Aerys roared. I will see who stands against the dragon's truth. Ring, and flame shall answer. A gold cloak rushed off. Rhaegar darted after, but 2 knights barred his path. Aerys' newest pets, Ser Giles Greycloak and Ser Jonathan Darry, their faces iced over with fanatic devotion. Beyond the doors, echoing up stone shafts, bells tolled. Once, twice, thrice. Rhaegar's chest tightened. Had Jaime removed every fuse? He prayed so. Yet the bells were more than triggers. They were calls to arms, signals to hidden sympathizers. He whirled back toward the throne. Aerys smiled. Hear that, son? The song of rebirth. Rhaegar's heart thundered. The song he heard was doom. In the labyrinth beneath Visegrad's hill, Jaime heard the bell's bronze moan reverberate through rock. He wiped sweat from his brow, meeting Dane's eye. Barrels still lined corridors like malignant eggs, but their fuses lay severed. Think he has backups? Jaime muttered. Dane's voice was grim. If so, they must be cut as well. They raced deeper into gloom. Rats scattered. Somewhere behind, Selmy ordered pyromancers bound and gagged. Dane's sword flashed, slicing cords of oil-soaked rope. Jaime hacked through another, and another. The bell tolled a 4th time, slower now, as though the instrument sensed futility but dutifully performed its dirge. At last, breath ragged, Dane signaled halt. They'd reached the lowest vault, a cavern flickering with green lantern flame. Piled along rough-hewn walls, 10 score barrels oozed fumes. In their midst, a figure knelt, slight, robed in gray, hands tracing glyphs across barrel lids. Bellies, Jaime growled. The alchemist turned, face half hidden by hood. Your swords undo divine work, he hissed, voice carrying oily resonance. You are but mortals. Fire is immortal. Jaime surged forward, but Dane blocked him with one arm. Let him speak. Bellies rose slowly. Wildfire is a dragon's memory. It remembers old Valyria, the doom, the screams of kings undone. You tremble before its roar because you are small. He raised a vial bright with swirling green. But I am its prophet. He flung the vial. Dane hurled himself sideways, colliding with Jaime. Glass burst against the far wall. A gout of emerald flame leapt, devouring black rock with crackling shrieks. Heat slapped Jaime's face. Barrels nearest the blaze began to simmer, wax seals melting. 7 hells, Jaime shouted. He seized a rust-flecked axe from a nearby rack and smashed Bellies' skull with one swing. Blood sprayed crimson into green firelight. Dane lunged to topple a barrel away from the flames. Smoke billowed. If one cast caught, the chain reaction would annihilate half the hill. Jaime and Dane strained, rolling barrels out of heat's kiss, their armor-searing faces with trapped hot air. A deafening whoosh as another barrel's lid buckled. But inside only smoke billowed, fuseless. They dragged it aside. Lanterns burst overhead. Shards rained. At length Dane stamped out the last lick of flame beneath a buckled shield. Gasping, armor scorched, they glared at the dead alchemist's crumpled form. Prophet, Jaime spat. More like pyre kindling. Dane coughed. We've delayed the blaze. But if Aerys commands his hand to fetch fresh fuses. Jaime wiped singed hair from his brow. Then a hand must strike before his. Rhaegar burst from the throne room into the queen's apartments. Riella sobbed within, midwives flitting like nervous sparrows. She clutched her swollen belly, another babe near term. Her eyes widened at Rhaegar's wild visage. What now? She asked. Pack only what you need, he urged, tugging open cedar chests. The city may soon choke on chaos. Her voice trembled. Your father, lost. Rhaegar met his mother's gaze, love and sorrow mingling. But I will not lose you. He summoned Llewellyn, a young squire, bade him gather Rhaenys and Aegon. Tots barely tall enough to know fear. Rhaenys clutched a wooden kitten. Aegon sucked his thumb. Riella kissed both, tears tracing new lines in age-weary cheeks. Prophecy said dragon heads must be 3. Rhaegar feared prophecy demanded they first pass through flame. With cloak swirling, he led them through servants' corridors toward a postern gate, Selmy joining with reports of dimmed fuses. Jaime and Dane approached from another stair, armor blackened by soot. "We ended the bells," Jaime announced, "and the prophet that served them." Rhaegar's nod brimmed grateful. Yet behind Jaime, Dane's gaze was distant. "Barrels still line every cell," he warned. Another spark and a thunderous crash cut him off. The Red Keep shook. Dust cascaded from rafters. Screams drifted from distant courtyards. Rhaegar's blood iced. "What was that?" Riella gasped. Selmy barked to a messenger who sprinted off. Moments later the man returned, pale. "Fire in Flea Bottom, my prince." A storehouse of pitch exploded. Wind drives flame toward the city walls. Rhaegar's heart hammered. If wildfire casks near the river gate caught, the conflagration would ripple back toward the keep. He shoved guilt aside. Action remained. "Barristan, escort my mother and children to Dragonstone by royal barge. Dawn will guard them. Jaime, ride with me to the river gate. We'll form a bucket line." Jaime flashed a crooked grin. "I prefer hammers to buckets, but lead on." Dane bowed to Riella, guiding her toward a stair. Rhaegar gripped his mother's hand once, whispering, "I will find light beyond the smoke." She squeezed back. Then he and Jaime sprinted through archways already hazed by acrid soot. Night plunged swift as a blanket. Flames painted the streets gold green. Flea Bottom boiled with panic. Roof-thatched shanties crackled like tinder. Folk screamed, stumbling with burning hair. Rhaegar, cloak wrapped across mouth, shoved through chaos, ordering gold cloaks into lines, commandeering wells, smashing water barrels. Jaime shadowed him, hammer knocking caved beams aside. They reached a cluster of barrels half buried under collapsed pottery. A slender trickle of green fire leaked from a shattered jar, licking straw. Jaime swore, heaving a cask upright. Rhaegar thrust a splintered board to dam the leak, but flame slit its length and blossomed anew. A howl rose behind. A horse ablaze, galloping blind. It crashed into a wagon of hay. Sparks flew skyward. Jaime swung the hammer, shattering wagon wheels, toppling load into a puddle where militia sloshed water. Ember hissed. Above the din, church bells clanged. Real alarm now, not death knells. Smoke blurred senses. Rhaegar coughed black phlegm. Out of swirling haze, a child stumbled, clothes aflame. Rhaegar dropped to knees, wrapped cloak about the boy, rolling him until fire quenched. Tears streaked soot on small cheeks. As he lifted the child to safety, he saw mothers, beggars, sellswords. All shared equal terror. Was this the cleansing his father desired? Beside him, Jaime hammered burning timber, forging a path to a cistern. They filled buckets, passed them down a ragged chain. Flames hissed, recoiled, surged again. It felt as though each gout of smoke whispered Aerys' cracked laughter. Hours crawled. At last, dawn's pearl light seeped beyond eastern walls, revealing devastation. 3 streets gutted, 50 charred corpses laid in rows. Yet the Red Keep still stood, wildfire stores unlit. Rhaegar sank onto broken stones, lungs raw. Jaime sat beside, grime masking gold hair. "Not the victory songs I relish," Jaime said wryly. Rhaegar's gaze swept ruin. "No songs suffice." He rose stiffly. "And still my father sits his throne." They trudged uphill. Unsullied morning breeze carried stench of smoke and grief. Atop Aegon's high hill, Aerys leaned from a balcony, watching charred rooftops smolder. His face shone with sweat, pupils pinprick. When he spied Rhaegar and Jaime, he clapped long, thin fingers. "My valiant heroes," he called, voice cracking. "You stifle my rebirth yet again. But dragons do not die so easy." Rhaegar bowed. "The fire is out, father. The people live." Aerys' smile twisted. "People? Cattle. Smoke drives insects from nests. The strong ascend." His gaze drifted, glassy. Soon we'll light a purer flame. Jaime stiffened. There is no purer flame than loyalty, your grace. Aerys laughed. Then be loyal to Ash. He turned, vanishing through crimson curtains. Jaime exhaled, jaw tight. Rhaegar touched his sleeve. He will not relent. Yet each day we delay, houses rally. Delay buys time, Jaime agreed. But time buys suspicion. Tywin's shadow grows. Rhaegar's eyes closed. He recalled Summerhall's ruin and Elaya's gentle sorrow. Prophecy murmured that the dragon must have 3 heads. Perhaps prophecy forgot to mention the cost. He opened his eyes to Jaime. When the moment comes, we must choose between 2 fires. One burns children, the other burns vows. Jaime's gaze flickered toward the throne room as though he could see the jagged silhouette of iron swords. I never liked vows much anyway. Rhaegar offered a wan smile, then slipped away to seek parchment and quill. He would write to Eddard Stark, to Jon Arryn, to any lord whose honor might outweigh fear. Let them know the crown was sick but not yet terminal. Let them prepare, should amputation be required. Across the narrow sea, in the manse of Illyrio Mopatis, the Magister opened Varys's letter beneath lanterns perfumed with cinnamon. He read, stroked his gilded beard, and chuckled. Slender silver-haired children played at Sivas nearby. Viserys petulant at a lost bishop, little Daenerys too young to grasp strategy. Illyrio whispered, Westeros cracks. Dragons will need fertile ground. He glanced at the children, calculating years, armies, coin. Opportunity was a sly seller. He would buy low and reap windfalls in chaos's harvest. Snow began to fall over Winterfell that same evening, lazy flakes spiraling like ashes. Bran watched from the tower window, feeling each crystal as a separate story drifting from sky to earth. Somewhere south, wildfire cooled to brittle glass in charred streets. Somewhere farther, lords congregated like thunderheads. The tapestry rippled, threads tugged by swords, quills, tears, and secrets, none fully aware of the boy who had loosed its first knot. Bran whispered into Frost, I will watch. Yet part of him feared the moment watching turned to wielding again. But fear was a shadow of life, and life, Bran sensed, still clung fiercely to every root, even in a world edged by fire. He drew the heavy wolfskin tighter, feeling the thrum of distant hearts. Jaime's restless courage, Rhaegar's brittle sorrow, Robert's rumbling defiance, Tywin's cold resolve, Varys's patient scheming. And beneath them all, Aerys' mad flame sputtered yet unquenched. Snow dusted Bran's lashes. In its hush he heard the oldest song of all. The turning of seasons, the promise that even pyres become soil. He breathed deep, and for a heartbeat, the future stood still, waiting for the next name of the storm. Iron-streaked clouds rolled over King's Landing like bruises on a dying titan, and the city's chimneys exhaled thin columns of ash that could have been mistaken for evening mist had the smell of pitch not clung so fiercely to every swirl. Rhaegar Targaryen inhaled that tainted air from the ramparts of Maegor's Holdfast and tasted failure. Failure to quiet the bells, failure to soothe the mad fury beneath his father's brittle crown, failure to promise peace to a realm now vibrating like a drawn bow. Below him, half the capital trudged ankle-deep through rubble and soggy charcoal in what had once been the fringe market. Women sifted the ruins of cookshops for iron pots. Fishmongers shouted hoarse at passers-by, hawking river eels spotted gray by smoke. Only the children's hearth, a ramshackle sept beside Cobbler's Square, still rang its hour, for its bell had escaped the fuse lines, and each mournful clang felt like a ghost of what the larger bells might have wrought. Behind Rhaegar, the tower stairs groaned and Ser Barristan Selmy emerged smelling of horse and hemp. He had ridden hard from Rosby after parleying with ravens bearing Tywin Lannister's crest. Ravens that offered no safe course, only ironclad contingencies. The Westerlands will march, Selmy said without preamble. Lord Tywin feigns neutrality, but his levies gather at the Gold Road's mouth. They claim it is to keep peace among the river lords. He passed a folded parchment to the prince. If we do not calm the realm swiftly, those swords may ride for or against us, wholly at Lord Tywin's choosing. Rhaegar's fingers brushed the seal, red wax, split by a roared lion impression so deep it nearly pierced the parchment. Tywin's envoy had written stiff courtesies, lamenting the fire, praising the prince's valor, and concluded with an invitation. Send your heir to Casterly Rock, where safety and counsel await him beyond the wildfire's pall. Thinly veiled, yet unmistakable. Hand the Iron Throne's succession to the Westerlands or watch their spears glint against King's Landing at sunrise. He folded the letter. I cannot bend to Lord Tywin while my father draws breath. Selmy's shoulders sagged beneath his white cloak. Then we must make the king see reason. Rhaegar remembered the look in Aerys' eyes when the bells tolled and no flames blossomed. Shock first, then fury, then an iridescent joy more terrible than either. The joy of a man who realizes his foes hide beneath every skin, and that paranoia grants permission to kill them all. Reason left his halls years ago, Rhaegar murmured. We must instead offer him mercy, a gentle exile perhaps to Dragonstone. There, far from voices that stoke his dread, he might pass the crown on his own accord. Selmy's silence conveyed exactly how unlikely a peaceful abdication seemed. The prince placed a hand on the older knight's arm. Find Jaime Lannister. Find Ser Arthur. We will convene before moonrise. Jaime Lannister spent that hour below the Street of Sisters, where a slanted cellar had been opened by the previous night's blaze. Wine barrels lay smashed like eggs. A sticky river of sour red pooled around scattered casks of wildfire hauled half-melted from closer vaults. Two alchemists in singed robes knelt beside each jar, muttering tally after tally while scribes recorded losses. When Jaime strode in, the pyromancers flinched, certain his blade would follow the flash of his smile. Instead, he asked questions. How many fuses remained in the entire city? How many jars had been relocated since dawn? Could wildfire be rendered inert by brine? Or was that another monk's tale? Rossart and Bellies were dead, yet lesser brethren still clung to their king's promise of exaltation. They answered unevenly, some out of fear, some out of loyalty to Flame. Jaime sifted their stories, pieced together a map in his head. Caches beneath the Dragon Gate, caches under the September of Baelor where pilgrims would never suspect, caches hidden in the crypts of long-dead royal bastards. The alchemists had moved many jars overnight to spare them from the spreading flea-bottom inferno, stowing them in empty cisterns along the muddy way. Those cisterns, Jaime realized, shared porous walls with the waterfront ratworks that vented fumes to the river. One spark from a dockside brazier could seep through hairline cracks and turn the entire eastern bank into a green tidal wave. Unseal them now, he commanded. Roll the jars into the Blackwater and pray the current is kind. If you defy me, I'll stack your heads atop the barrels myself. The threat landed like a mailed fist. They scramble. D to obey. He lingered just long enough to see a barrel splashed with river water, hiss but not ignite. Its seal compromised, yet cooling harmlessly. Relief pulsed like wine through his veins. As he climbed from the cellar, shouts rose up the hill. Gold cloaks clashing with mail-clad knights in crimson cloaks. The first skirmish between City Watch and Westerland outriders scouting the Ring of Rhaenys. Steel rang, but blades struck flats. Both sides held back, as though testing the heat of a forge before plunging in. Jaime watched from shadow, golden mane hidden under a soot-stained hood, and wondered which banner he would raise when next they met in earnest. Across the narrow sea, the soft susurrus of Braavos' canal sighed beneath a gray dawn. In a third-floor room of the House of Black and White, a tall man with a kindly smile listened to rumors brought by a thin-faced novice whose steps made no splash across damp stone. The Dragon King is mad, the youth whispered. Pyres light the capital and lions stir. The kindly man nodded, dismissing her. Alone he peeled away his face and washed its dye into the basin, revealing the ageless rictus beneath. Wars in Westeros minted widows and orphans. Death there paid the many-faced gods tithe in droves. If wildfire were truly to scour King's Landing, the gods' coffers would swell beyond measure. He sighed, as though such bounty tasted bitter, and set aside his half-carved mask of a young girl with silver hair, work yet unfinished. At Winterfell, snow thickened, muffling the world in white hush. Bran drifted along the weirwood's roots again, yet he kept to the shallows, skimming memories rather than inhabiting them. Vision still pressed on the edges. Robert's hammer crashing into the helm of a Reach Knight before the gates of stony September. Ned Stark kneeling in ash that once was the Tower of Joy, a green blaze roaring up the Blackwater in towering curtains while small boats overturned in its glare. He did not force himself deeper, fearful that one misstep might tip the future further into ruin. Instead, he watched, noting each branching path like lines on the palm of a hand. A gust of wind rattled the tower shutters. Bran blinked awake, and Mira Reed's silhouette framed by candlelight came into focus. "Storm on the horizon," she said, setting fresh reeds atop the fire. "Maester Luwin says the barometer falls like a stone." Bran's voice was rough with sleep. "Storms are wounds in time," he muttered. Mira knelt. "Have you seen new wounds?" He hesitated, weighing honesty. "I saw the bells toll again," he whispered. "And this time, something else answered." Mira's brow knit. "Do we act?" Bran shook his head. "No more words across years. But perhaps I can reach someone nearer. Someone listening." He closed his eyes, thought of crows perched on the Red Keep's guttering rails, their beaks slick with soot. "Fly," he whispered. "Fly to the prince with the harp. Tell him winter's song demands haste." But he sent no visions, no voices, only a restless unease that might curl beneath Rhaegar's dreams like distant thunder. The prince indeed dreamed uneasily that night. He wandered empty courtyards whose flagstones wept blood. He heard a lullaby sung by a woman with painted blue lips, promising a child of ash who would burn the world to save it. He woke before dawn in a sweat, heart racing. Outside his chamber window, ravens cawed incessant, clawing one another for perch space on the sill. When he rose, they scattered, leaving 3 black feathers stuck to the frost. Rhaegar, dressed in riding leathers, braided hair back with a scarlet ribbon, and strode to meet Ser Arthur and Selmy beneath the lantern-lit portico. Jaime arrived moments later, still smelling of cellar smoke. They retreated into a narrow courtyard where the last leaves of a dying maidenhair tree fluttered like torn parchment. "We strike tonight," Rhaegar said, voice tight. "Father will attend a midnight audience with the High Alchemist in the Hall of 1,000 Flames." He glanced to Jaime for confirmation. "Rossart dead, Belly's dead," Jaime replied. "But Qyburn has slithered into their place. I watched him coax the king with talk of undying embers. Aerys lingers there for hours, sniffing fumes. Then inside that hall we must insist upon abdication," Rhaegar said. "He may accept exile if confronted by 3 Kingsguard blades and the weight of my claim. I would spare the realm further blood." Ser Arthur rested hand upon Dawn's pommel. "If he refuses and raises a dagger?" Jaime's chuckle was like steel on stone. "Then the realm will have one less madman." Selmy frowned, yet nodded. Oaths trembled. Yet each man understood mercy sometimes wore a killing edge. Moonless night cloaked the Red Keep. Rhaella Targaryen, escorted by Dane and a dozen loyal guards, slipped through the water gate into a barge bound for Dragonstone. Sea mist swallowed the lantern's glow. From the deck her children stared back toward the looming keep. Rhaenys clutched her kitten, murmuring not to cry. The babe Aegon burrowed into blankets while a nurse shushed him with half-remembered hymns. Dane stood astern, hand on Dawn, scanning shadows for shapes that might swim in their wake. He carried a sealed letter from Rhaegar, instructing the garrison at Dragonstone to hold fast, to trust only knights bearing the prince's seal, and to ready the ancient fortress for a council of lords. As the barge drifted into blackness, lanterns on the quay gutters winked out one by one, as though snuffed by an unseen hand. In Aerys' hall of 1,000 flames, braziers lined the walls in pairs, their tongues licking so high that scorched soot patterned the ceiling like a charred starfield. Qyburn, hooded and quietly exultant, mixed powdered pine pitch with naphtha in a silver mortar, then poured the broth into an iron censer shaped like a dragon's gaping maw. Every breath burned the lungs. Aerys sat atop a modest bronze dais, eyes watering, though whether from smoke or ecstasy was unclear. Around him, for new Kingsguard recruits, granted white cloaks only weeks earlier, stood Sentinel. Ser Jonathan Derry, Ser Giles Greycloak, Ser Boros Blunt, and the lean, hawk-nosed Ser Oswell Kettleblack. Rhaegar entered first, cloak of black and scarlet swirling the fumes. Jaime followed, visor up. Selmy trailed, expression stony. Qyburn dipped a mocking bow, yet his fingers brushed the whipstaff that controlled the brazier's vents. One twist could flood the chamber with a canopy of sparks. "Father," Rhaegar began, voice pitched low so the recruits need not hear each word. "Dragonstone awaits you, prepared in honor and safety." Aerys' chuckle rasped like a saw through bone. "Dragonstone," he echoed, picking at a scab on his chin. "A tomb of ghosts and salt. Do you mean to bury me there before I am reborn?" "No tomb, only respite." Rhaegar drew nearer, each step calculated, gentle. "The realm is restless. Let me hand you peace. Sign the letters of regency. Let me rule until your humors recover." Aerys' face spasmed between rage and fear. "Rule? I see it now, you conspire with these white worms. Did you not slay Rossart? Did you not steal my fire?" Jaime's hand slid to sword hilt. Selmy mirrored him. The four younger guards tightened grips on spears. Rhaegar extended an open palm. "No conspiracies, only duty to our people. The alchemists endangered them." "People," Aerys sneered. "They bray like asses, rut like swine, breed traitors. Only fire purifies." He turned, gestured for Qyburn to raise the censer. Thick green smoke billowed. The newcomers coughed. Selmy's eyes watered, but he held firm. Jaime stepped forward. "Your Grace, the barrels beneath Visigna's hill are half-crushed. Any spark could roar through tunnels and ignite the entire fortress, including this hall." Aerys smiled wide. "Then let us bare our throats to the flame and see who the god of fire favors." Rhaegar saw the mania crescendo behind those eyes. He glanced at Selmy now. Selmy advanced, helm visor down. Jaime mirrored him. Rhaegar drew no sword, but his hand hovered near the hilt of Dark Sister, the ancestral blade gifted him by his mother for his name day. He prayed he would not need it. "Father?" He tried once more, voice cracking with genuine sorrow. "I beg you withdraw." Aerys rose. Greasy hair clung to sweat-slicked cheeks. In one motion, he snatched a brass rod from a brazier stand, its tip aflame. He thrust it toward Rhaegar.
Très torson.
Jaime drew steel. Selmy too. The younger guards hesitated, torn between sworn duty and this spectacle of king versus crown prince. Qyburn spun the whipstaff. Flames leapt higher. What happened next Bran Stark would recall in the Weirwood's bleeding sap for the rest of his days. Rhaegar sidestepped, but Aerys lunged again, raw fury lending him speed. The torch grazed Rhaegar's cloak, setting silk alight. Selmy sprang, knocking the torch away, but Aerys whirled left, whipped the rod at Jaime. Instinct more than intent guided Jaime Lannister's sword. It rose, parried the torch aside, and in that same heartbeat, the sword's edge carved across the king's gaunt neck. Blood sprayed black in the lurid green glow. Time froze. Rhaegar's horrified gasp, Selmy's eyes widening, Qyburn's hiss of delight, the recruit's spears wavering. Then Aerys toppled. His body hit the dais steps, and a gout of brazier coals cascaded down with him. Green flames licked the spilled blood, sputtered, but did not kindle fully. Smoke thickened. Jaime stood shaking, blade crimson. His mouth opened but no words came. Selmy struck Qyburn in the temple with shield rim. The alchemist crumpled. Two recruits fell to knees, retching. Rhaegar knelt beside his father. The king's lips moved, perhaps a curse, perhaps a plea none could hear. Eyes once fever-bright dulled, as though the soul had vanished ahead of the final exhale. And with that breath, the Targaryen line's longest reign ended. Blood pooled, reflecting the brazier's glow like some obscene coronation pool. Rhaegar pressed trembling fingers to the king's throat. No pulse. He closed Aerys' eyes. He rose, turning to Jaime, whose face contorted between shock and grim resolve. Selmy watched, waiting for the prince's judgment. Rhaegar lifted a hand. "You are forgiven," he whispered, too soft for anyone but Jaime to hear. "You have saved tens of thousands." Aloud, for all. "Ser Jaime Lannister has ended a tyranny this night at my command. None shall gainsay his honor." Jaime's jaw slackened, relief mingled with grief. Yet within, he knew legends would murmur Kingslayer for centuries. No royal edict could quell that whisper. Rhaegar addressed the younger guards. "Bear witness. The king is dead." He drew Dark Sister, raised its black blade. "All hail Rhaegar of House Targaryen, king of the Undulls, Rhoynar, and the First Men, protector of the realm." Selmy knelt at once, placing sword tip to floor. Slowly, reluctantly, the recruits followed. Jaime hesitated, eyes locked on the corpse he'd made, then bent the knee. Flames guttered, casting twisted shadows across bent heads. Smoke coiled overhead like a newborn dragon testing wings. Somewhere in the distance, bells began to toll again, this time not as triggers, but as heralds to a dawn none had imagined. The city woke to rumors spreading faster than dawn's first light. Merchants whispered that Aerys had fled, or been devoured by his own fire. Septas claimed an angel of the Seven had struck him down for heresy. Gold cloaks quartered the avenues, repeating official proclamation. King Rhaegar ascended, pledging bread to the hungry and water to the ashes. The mood swayed between cautious hope and fearful disbelief. After all, what was a new dragon but the old dragon's brood? Atop the Red Keep, Rhaegar stood on a battlement, cloak smoking, hair unbound. He watched dawn stain the Blackwater gold, watched gulls circle the half-burned granaries, smelled a breeze no longer sweet but at least not acrid. He turned as Jaime approached, the white cloak awkward on his shoulders now heavy with stain. "I would have spared him in chains," Rhaegar said. "Yet the gods chose steel." Jaime offered a brittle smile. "The gods only guide. We wield." Rhaegar's gaze lingered on the horizon where sails dotted the bay. Merchant, war, corsair. Among them he imagined Dornish warships carrying his mother toward refuge. Imagined Lannister galleys in waiting. Imagined Stormlander longships massed behind Robert's unconquerable will. Peace hung by one brittle thread. How swiftly could he prove himself more than a usurper? He clapped Jaime's shoulder. "Ride for Casterly Rock. Carry my seal. Tell Lord Tywin I will honor his counsel and his daughter, if he will bow to peace. I will free you of the Kingsguard for this task." Jaime's mouth parted. Freedom? Kingsguard vows for life. Yet he thought of Cersei waiting behind gold-framed windows, of a father whose pride could ignite war, of the stain already upon his name. He bowed. "I will carry your words." Yet he kept the white cloak draped over his arm, unsure whether to fold it away or cling to its tatters. North of the Trident, thunderheads crawled across the sky like vast gray wolves. Robert Baratheon rode beneath them, hammer resting across his saddle, eyes fixed on the distant smoke curling above King's Landing. Jon Connington handed him a damp parchment brought by Raven 2 hours earlier. Aerys dead, Rhaegar crowned, wildfire contained. Robert crushed the missive in one fist. Dead by whose hand? Connington cleared his throat. "Ser Jaime Lannister, so it says." Robert barked laughter that sounded more like storm surge against cliffs. "The cub slays the lion's king and now fetches the lion's lord to kneel. 7 save us from southern courtiers." He wheeled his charger, mud slinging from hooves. "We ride on. Let the crown prince parley with Tywin. I'll stand at his gates and see whether mad blood truly died with its sire." Connington reined his mount alongside. "If Rhaegar seeks peace." "The war began with a stolen girl and a broken betrothal," Robert snapped. "That wound has not been bound." He hammered a gauntlet fist against his chest. "Lyanna remains stolen, or dead. Until truth is laid bare, the storm does not roll back." A crack of thunder underscored his vow. Men of the Stormlands roared approval, pounding axe on shield. Somewhere within their ranks, Stannis Baratheon stared ahead, jaw clenched, questioning whether rights and wrongs could still be tallied when kings were struck down in smoke-filled chambers. In the Aerys High Aerys Solar, Lord John Arryn read the same raven message twice, then sank onto a cushioned bench. Lisa Tully, red-rimmed eyes gleaming with fretful hope, asked whether war had ended. John Arryn, gentle though his sigh carried decades of weariness, answered that wars seldom end with the fall of a single tyrant. They simply molt into new shapes. He penned swift replies, one to Winterfell urging Eddard Stark to remain wary yet open to Rhaegar's entreaties, another to Lord Tyrell counseling restraint, a third to King's Landing, congratulating the new king but requesting proof of stability before the Vale committed arms or grains. As his quill scraped parchment, he pondered how prophecy, the ghost beneath every crown in Westeros, still murmured about dragons and winter's doom. If Rhaegar truly sought peace, perhaps the realm might brace for the darker threat Arryn felt in each chill gust from the north. That same chill swept through the courtyard of Winterfell as ravens arrived in quick succession. One bore news of Aerys' death, another hours later of Rhaegar's coronation. A third carried Robert Baratheon's call for Stark arms to march south and join his justice. Ned Stark read them in silence. His brother Brandon would have galloped south already, blade-hungry for action. Their father would have weighed honor over caution. But both were years in graves Bran's meddling could not unmake. Ned, forged by grief and duty, felt the cold settle deeper into his marrow. He summoned his bannermen to the great hall. As the long wooden benches filled with fur-clad lords, Ned's words rang steady. The winds shift. We face not one choice but many, each steeped in cost. He voiced no decision yet, but his gaze drifted to the empty seat where his sister Lyanna once danced to minstrel strings. Allies clamored for her fate to finally be revealed. Was she queen, concubine, or corpse? The North's honor hinged on that answer. Ned prayed the next raven bore not another riddle but the plain truth. Bran watched from the rafters in the skin of a small barn owl. He felt his brother's turmoil like frost around the heart. In his green sight, he glimpsed Lyanna's bed in a tower of pale stone wreathed in blue roses, saw her whisper secrets to Rhaegar about love and prophecy. Yet such visions jumbled across timelines, their certainties shifting whenever Bran blinked. To reveal them might untie old knots or lash new ones. He banked away, wings silent, and glided above the godswood. On the pond's glassy surface he saw the moon, a silver coin floating on black water. Around it rippled images, Jaime before Tywin, Robert before King's Gate, Rhaegar kneeling at the silent crib of his newborn daughter. Dany, her name felt like a bell of spring in Bran's mind, so many threads vibrating. He longed to pluck them into harmony, but each time he reached, he remembered burning streets and screamed into feathers. Not yet, he whispered in owl speech. I will wait. At Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister received Jaime alone in the Hall of the 100 Hearths, though none burned save one modest brazier. Shadows shrouded tapestries. The Lion of Casterly Rock looked older than when Jaime left. His son knelt, placed Rhaegar's sealed letter on a column base, and kept eyes lowered. Tywin picked it up, broke wax with a thumb, and read without outward expression. So, he said at length, voice as chill as mountain stone. You slew the king you were sworn to protect and now offer me an alliance authored by his son. He set the letter aside. Tell me, does the new king reward regicide with promotion or exile? Jaime's stomach twisted. He met his father's gaze. He pardons. He understands necessity. He swallowed. I saved the city, father. Rhaegar would have died, thousands with him, had I hesitated. Tywin's stare drilled cold holes. The pages of history are not penned by understanding, but by ink and memory. Ink fades, memory lingers. They shall name you Kingslayer, whatever pardons. He stepped nearer, voice low. Did the prince promise your sister's hand to him? Jaime flinched. No. Tywin's thin smile cut. Then he offers bread but withholds feast. The rock does not kneel for scraps. He turned, pacing before the dying hearth. Yet open war now would paint our shields with treason. Better to feign allegiance, gather coin, measure the young dragon's wingspan. When Robert's storm batters King's Landing, we shall decide which ruin best profits a lion. Jaime's heart pounded. "I did not come for intrigue. I came for peace." Tywin looked back. Peace is the prize of patience. He lifted a small golden key from his belt, tossed it. Jaime caught it awkwardly. "Your chambers remain yours," Tywin said. "Hang or fold your cloak as you will." Jaime stared at the key. He had been offered freedom, but freedom, he now saw, was not escape but a labyrinth. Behind him, the single hearth crackled, casting lion-shaped shadows across the hall. Dawn on Dragonstone painted the black walls rose gold. Riella, heavy with child, stood upon Windworm's rampart and watched Gull's wheel. Beside her, Ser Arthur Dane delivered tidings by Raven, Aerys D.A. D. Rhaegar crowned, wildfire contained. Tears slipped down her cheeks, though whether for loss of husband, relief of refuge, or fear for what came next, not even she could say. Inside the Sea Dragon Tower, maesters prepared for a birth they prayed would prove easier than the last two. Riella whispered to her unborn daughter, promising a gentler world, but the gulls shrieked like knives against sky, as though skeptical. King Rhaegar convened his first council in the Red Keep's Tower of the Hand, though he had yet to name a hand. Selmy, Carlton Chelsted's successor as Lord Commander. Varys, Quiet Spider, Grand Maester Pycelle, Lord John Connington freshly summoned, and Princess Elia, face wan but eyes sharp. Maps unfurled across the table, marking troop positions like seeds upon fertile soil. Robert marched with 20,000 storm spears. Eddard Stark assembled bannermen in the north. Tyrell legions rustled in their gardens. Greyjoy sails sniffed foamy wind. Dorne's spears waited behind the Bone Way, uncertain whether vengeance or alliance would fill their scabbards. "We need swift legitimacy," Elia urged. "Crown our son Aegon before the Great September. Proclaim amnesty. Host a grand tourney. Show the realm the dragon has two heads, king and prince, both sane." Pycelle stroked beard. "Bread may mollify small folk, but lords count coin. Lord Tywin's coffers exceed the crowns." Rhaegar nodded. "Then we win hearts first, pocket second." He looked to Varys. "Send ravens to every septon who can still read. Let them speak of a prince who rescued children from the flea-bottom flames." He met Selmy's stern gaze. "And you, my friend, must show the court that the Kingsguard serves the realm again." Selmy bowed. As ever. Only Varys noticed the tremor in Rhaegar's hand as he rolled the map. Even kings bleed inside their gloves. Robert Baratheon reached the trident at Stonehenge and camped upon its western bank. There, ravens at last confirmed Aerys' death. Knights toasted, men cheered, but Robert's eyes were storm gray. Death of a mad king did not raise Lyanna from whatever bed or grave she lay in. He dispatched envoys to Rhaegar demanding her release. He also sent a sealed letter to Eddard Stark describing his heart's fury and swearing that if Rhaegar's crown rested on Lyanna's tears, he would dash it into the mud. Storm clouds gathered overhead. Lightning forked in the east, illuminating the river with blue fire. Fishermen said monsters lurked deep in the trident's silt, ancient and hungry. Robert smiled grimly. Monsters or kings, he would hammer them all. In his tower chamber, Bran Stark sank beneath blankets. The owl's journey exhausted him. The weight of futures pressed like millstones. He thought of Jaime standing alone in lion shadows, Rhaegar straining to compose a kingdom's symphony, Robert thundering, Ned deliberating. Each thread glowed, then faded, then glowed again, shifting as though the tapestry were weaving itself one heartbeat at a time. Perhaps it always had. Perhaps Bran's warning to Aerys had merely torn away illusions of control. Yet within that ragged tear, new colors emerged. Shades of mercy he'd never glimpsed when the dance of dragons in old tales ended only in cinder. He closed his eyes, whispered to the weirwood, "Guide them," and for the first time since he meddled with the past, he dreamed not of fire, but of morning sunlight upon new green leaves, a choir of ravens singing welcome to a dawn unscripted by fear. Outside, snow melted upon the blackened stones of Winterfell's parapets, dripping into the soil like tears turned to water, seeds seeking spring. Storm lanterns guttered in the byways of the crown city as night deepened, their sooty light coaxing monstrous silhouettes out of scorched facades. In the half-rebuilt fringe market, a choir of children huddled in a gutted fruit stall, trading soot-blackened chestnuts for lullabies. Each note hung brittle in the cold and drifted upward toward alley eaves where ravens argued in rasping counterpoint. The feverish hush that had weighed upon King's Landing for weeks now seemed to pulse with something else. Anticipation, perhaps, or the first hesitant thaw of trust that follows a calamity narrowly averted. Yet in the corridors of power the air remained razor-thin and tense, as though every courtesan's whisper might still ignite hidden casks no sword had found. King Rhaegar left his private solar just past the 3rd hour, stepping onto a windowless stair that corkscrewed to the maester's tower. A single candle guided him. Its light gilded the hollows of his cheeks and revealed streaks of soot the bathhouse servants had missed behind his ears. He climbed slowly, mind-rigging arguments like siege ladders, proof of the wildfire caches destroyed, writs of indemnity for the crownlands, pardons already signed for dissenters whose fealty could be bought with mercy. Each declaration would have to be fitted to a face. Tyrell Hotur, Tully Principle, Aaron Prudence, Greyjoy Swagger, Stark Suspicion, Baratheon Wrath. One mismatched line and the fragile scaffold might shudder apart. Atop the stairs Grand Maester Pycelle waited in his cluttered observatory, robe tugged tight against the sea breeze. A brass astrolabe rocked beside a sputtering brazier. Its concentric rings cast little moons of shadow across parchment stacks. Pycelle bowed low enough to reveal dandruff glimmering in his hair, but when he straightened his eyes shone with something keener than obsequy. Ravens returned from Gulltown and Highgarden within the hour, he croaked, offering 2 scrolls wound in violet ribbon. Lord Aaron bestows cautious blessing upon your grace's ascension, though he urges swift confirmation of Lyanna Stark's welfare. Lord Tyrell, for his part, congratulates and inquires whether the great tourney you hinted at might be hosted upon the Mander, that the realm may feast upon Reach bounty while witnessing unity. Rhaegar broke the first seal, scanned Aaron's neat hand, then the second. He felt a small loosening under his ribs. These were not oaths, but they were not threats either. Coins stacked upon a scale did not guarantee balance, yet weight could be shifted by patience. And from the Stormlands? He asked. None but silence, Pycelle admitted. Yet we hear Robert Baratheon encamped at Stony September. Some say every anvil in the camp rings long into the night. Hammers love clamor. Hearts love answers, Rhaegar finished. He set both scrolls aside. Dispatch ravens. Within 7 days, the crown will host a conclave of lords at Harrenhal. Bread and salt for every banner. Judgment for no man until words are heard. The Storm King included. He turned, the candle fluttering. And draft terms. A guarantee of trial by lordly peers for any who fear charges of treason. Let them see I wield justice, not fire. Pycelle bent his head. Wisely spoken, your grace. Yet his tone carried the tremble of foreboding, for Harrenhal's black towers still murmured with tales of curses and mad feasts. Rhaegar knew. He had sung beneath those vaulted ceilings once, when spring's end seemed a promise rather than a memory. But Harrenhal also lay halfway between the roaring storm host and the rising northern banners, neutral ground in a land short of such places. He descended the stair, candle guttering, and felt the trembling of his own exhaustion. Somewhere below, Elia nursed Aegon while Rhaenys slept clutching the wooden kitten, dreaming perhaps of gardens unburned. He would kiss them before dawn. For now duty knotted his spine straighter than any sash. Beneath the lion gate of Casterly Rock, Jaime stared out over a moon-frosted sea, armor's edge silvered under starlight. The salt tang cleared the last of the red keep's smoke from his throat, but not the echo of steel-biting flesh. Behind him, the fortress murmured with the labored snores of miners and shieldsmiths. Ahead, the surf sang a ceaseless dirge. Somewhere downshore torchlit barges unloaded or for the forges, each clang of iron a reminder that his father's patience crafted deadlier weapons than wildfire ever could. He heard steps scrape gravel, turned to find Kevan Lannister in furred cloak, face kinder than Tywin's but carved from similar stone. "You've not slept?" Kevin noted. Dreams are poorly armed, Jaime replied, then immediately regretted the bitterness. Kevin joined him at the parapet. The city watch sings your name. Even the small folk cheer the Kingslayer. He laid a steady hand on Jaime's shoulder. Glory and shame have always shared a bed. I had no taste for either, Jaime murmured, voice rough. Only for stopping the flames. Kevin studied his nephew. Tywin will keep counsel with himself until dawn. When he calls you, remember, a king's pardon cannot erase the songs. But gold buys the minstrels, and deeds yet to come may drown the chorus. Jaime nodded, though the promise offered little comfort. He pictured Cersei pacing some distant hall, golden hair unbound, mind racing through possibilities. Would she be queen, or exile, or pawn? All depended on the next hours. He feared how little of that storm lay within his grasp. Kevin released his shoulder, departed. Alone, Jaime watched waves claw at the cliff foot, froth glowing faintly. Above, constellations shifted as if some cosmic hand advanced armies across a blackened map. For the first time since he knelt beside a bleeding king, he prayed, not to the Seven, but to whichever nameless god weighed motives alongside actions. If such a judge existed, Jaime begged to be seen not as a kingslayer, but a city saver. On Dragonstone, Riella's labor seized her before sunrise. Thunder rumbled across the narrow sea as midwives bustled through the sea dragon tower, their footsteps echoing in the spiraling stair like frightened heartbeats. Candle smoke mingled with the tang of salt and iron. Incantations to the mother were whispered between gritted teeth. Maester Gerardis plied calming draughts, but the queen's cries still pierced volcanic stone. Ser Arthur Dayne stood sentinel outside the chamber doors, knuckles white on Dawn's moon-pale grip. He had faced wraiths in the Dornish sands, cut down cell sails screaming for quarter along Stepstone's beachheads, but those were simple horrors. Here, he could do nothing but wait as flesh and fate wrestled behind oak planks. Time strained. When at last the door opened, a midwife emerged carrying a tiny bundle swaddled in crimson linen. Dayne glimpsed a shock of silver-gold hair, a fist no larger than a sparrow's heart. The babe wailed once, high, strong, then quieted as though hearing a lullaby only dragons know. The midwife bowed, tears gleaming. A daughter, sire. The queen lives. Relief raked Dayne's chest. He stood aside as the woman hurried to fetch warm milk. Inside, Riella's breaths came ragged. Yet when Dayne peeked, he saw a weary smile curve the queen's lips. She whispered something he caught clear as steel. Her name is Daenerys, Stormborn. Lightning clutch-hammered the distant sky. Dayne considered the omen, wondered whether storms heralded doom or deliverance, and felt the weight of prophecy settle across his shoulders like frost itself. Across the green fork of the trident, Robert Baratheon shattered a practice dummy's helm with a swing that ripped straw and splinter into the night air. Sweat dripped from his beard. His men cheered, partly in awe, partly fearing to join him lest they be next to feel the hammer's kiss. Jon Connington watched, arms folded. When dawn breaks, Connington ventured, we should ride. If Rhaegar plans a conclave at Harrenhal, better to arrive before the lions do. Robert flung the ruined helm aside. Dragons call councils so men forget why they brandish steel. Connington stepped closer. If Lyanna lives, then we fetch her, Robert snarled. If she lies in a crypt, we fetch vengeance. He planted the hammer head down, leaning on its shaft. Rhaegar crowned himself on a pyre of his father's making. Fine. I'll judge him when he stands before the gods and me. Stonehedge's lord may deny our passage, Connington warned. Robert laughed, loud as thunder. No wall of stone bars the storm when the storm is angered. He speared Connington with a hard glance. Yet I'll not slaughter men sworn to the Riverlands unless Bane forces it. Send riders with my terms. Safe crossing, no harm to harvest. If they yield, wine flows. If not, he hefted the hammer. We break the dam. In Riverrun Solar, Hoster Tully dipped quill into ink, drafting the reply to Rhaegar's invitation. Words swam before his eyes. Gout pains throbbed. Caitlin and Lisa flanked him, silent but watchful. He weighed alliances like a miller weighs flour. Stark honor, Arryn justice, Baratheon fervor, Targaryen rightful crown. Each could turn to stone or seed. At last he wrote, "The Riverlands will come to Harrenhal in faith of bread and salt. But we shall come bearing witness for the wolf and the stag both." He sealed the missive with trout wax. The future, he knew, might drown in the very moat that ringed his castle. Yet better to ride currents than remain among reeds while war bloomed upstream. High on the wall of Storm's End, lonely Stannis Baratheon oversaw the loading of Blackhull cogs. Bolts of lightning. The other, a three-headed dragon wreathed in lilies. Between them rode a dire wolf bearing a maiden in his jaws. Yet she did not bleed, she sang. Her song rippled across the field, untwisting banners into ribbons that rose skyward and became white ravens. The armies lowered their weapons. The ground beneath sprouted pale blue flowers that smelled of frost and spring together. Bran woke just before dawn to ravens shrieking over the battlements. Snow melted on his window ledge, trickling like tears into the stone. In the dry hush before sunrise, 3 riders escorted a litter through Harrenhal's ruined gatehouse. Ned Stark stood waiting, cloak like shadow. When attendants peeled back linen curtains, his breath caught. Lyanna lay pale but alive, hollows under her eyes, yet a small smile on chapped lips. She gripped his hand. Her fingers felt warm. "They didn't hurt me, Ned," she whispered. "Terrible fever, but Ser Gerald cared well." She coughed softly, gazed at the dawn line. "Tell Robert the First will speak for myself." Moments later, in the still gloom great hall, lords pressed close. Rhaegar, Robert, Ned, Elia, each wore a mask of future's weight. Lyanna, cloaked in simple gray, walked between Ned and a septa. She looked smaller than the realm's fury had painted her, yet her eyes shone fierce. "I was not abducted," she said, voice echoing through the silence. "I fled. I loved the prince, and he me. I carry his child." Robert's face slackened, rage drained to shock. He seemed to shrink. Ned closed eyes as if stabbed by memory. Lyanna drew breath. "But love is no king's writ. I claim the right of free woman's choice, to return to Winterfell, to bear my child beneath Graydon's weeping willows, and to bind no man's crown with my fate." She looked to Rhaegar. "I release you." Rhaegar bowed his head, ruby crown glinting like captured dawn. Elia watched, expression unreadable. Robert's hammer clanged to the floor. He sank to a knee, shoulders shaking. Connington laid a hand on his arm. Silence heaved, then shattered as Hoster Tully rose, applauding slowly, joined by Mace Tyrell, then by Varys's soft clap echoing from shadows. Applause swelled into thunder. In that roar, grief mingled with relief. A realm exhaled. Rhaegar stepped down, knelt before Robert. "I beg pardon for the pain I caused. If you still desire duel, name the field." Robert stared long. At last he grasped the offered forearm, hauling the prince up. "No duel," he muttered hoarsely. "Bastards of pride, both of us." He turned to Lyanna. "May your child know better fathers than we were suitors." Tears cut tracks in soot on his cheeks. Ned embraced his sister gently, as though she might again vanish. The northern banners dipped in respect. Across the hall, Jaime exhaled the breath he'd unknowingly held. Tywin's letter in his pouch felt suddenly lighter. The conclave lasted 3 more days, long enough to weave parchments of accord. Wildfire stocks dismantled under joint watch. Crown debts restructured by loans from Casterly Rock. Interest mild yet firm. A council of regents including Arryn, Stark, and Martell until the realm healed. Robert pledged Stormlander loyalty, though he would return south to rebuild torch towns. Lyanna departed for Winterfell under escort of Dane and Selmy, carrying Maester's herbs for her lingering cough and a personal letter from Elia promising friendship for the children bound by shared blood. On the final morning, Rhaegar stood atop Harrenhal's windy tower with Jaime at his side. They watched ravens spiral into limitless sky. "Songwriters will not be kind," Jaime said, half grim, half amused. "Perhaps not," Rhaegar answered. But children yet unborn will live to hear those songs. That is enough. He turned to the Kingslayer, placed a ruby-inlaid pin shaped as a 7-pointed star upon his cloak. Rise, Lord Commander.
Ser barristan wishes retirement.
The white cloaks need a steady hand. Jaime swallowed, unsure whether honor or irony crowned him this time. Yet in the prince's, or now the king's, eyes he saw earnest gratitude. He knelt, accepted. Below, through broken stone teeth, sunlight painted the trident silver blue. Merchants' carts rolled again along the king's road. In distant fields, reachers harvested late barley. On Dragonstone, a baby girl slept to the lullaby of gulls. Across the shivering sea, a faceless god hung new masks for dreams yet to be born. And in the god's wood of Winterfell, Bran Stark watched flakes melt on sun-warmed bark and realized the tapestry no longer writhed under his fingertips but pulsed with a steadier beat. Imperfect, fragile, but alive. He whispered thanks to the roots and rose on steady arms, feeling at last that the storm he had named had passed. Yet deep inside he understood. Storms return with seasons, and watchers must keep watch lest silence breed darker fires. Still, for this one nit of time, the realm breathed peace. The wolf pups played. The snow smelled clean. He turned toward the keep, where laughter floated from the kitchens, where letters brought tales of tourneys planned at Riverrun, of Dornish gardens open to northern visitors, of Harrenhal's melted towers soon to hold a new school of forging flames to lanterns. War, perhaps, would come again, but if so, it would not be born of wildfire whispered by a desperate boy across years. Bran smiled, and the weirwood seemed to breathe with him, its red leaves stirring though the wind had gone still. Thus the first dawn of the Dragon King's peace spread across Westeros. Uncertain as any sunrise, yet in that fragile glow every heart, great and small, felt for a moment the hush of fresh-fallen snow unmarked by boot or blood, waiting for new stories to press gentle prints upon its surface. The raven's wing beats sounded like rain on cracked marble as it crossed the pale disk of the moon, descended past the leaning towers of Harrenhal, and alit on the sill of a drafty window in the northeast turret. A hush clung to those stones now. Some said it was the castle's relief at hearing treaty words rather than war cries. Others that Harren's ghosts listened, wary lest peace ring hollow. Inside the shutterless chamber, Jaime Lannister lay awake despite the late hour, hands folded beneath his head, eyes fixed on the star-flecked void above him. The soft swish of the raven's feathers stirred him. He turned just enough to see it hop along the sill, tilt its head, and croak a single rasped syllable craw. A message tube showed bright against the bird's black leg. He sat up, tasting stale wine and stone dust, and eased himself from the narrow bed. When he plucked the raven's burden free, the bird launched skyward without waiting for crumbs. Jaime slit the wax with a fingernail, unfurled the strip. Only 6 words in the angular, impatient script of his sister. "What mask will you wear home?" There was no signature. None was needed. A slow breath hissed between Jaime's teeth. Cersei burned in every stroke of ink, in every absence of tenderness, and in the question's demand. Tywin would already be polishing a mask for him, no doubt silver polish on bright steel. And Rhaegar, for all his gentle gratitude, had placed a heavier one, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, a mask of white that could not be removed without stripping skin. Jaime crumpled the strip, fed it to a half-spent candle until flame nipped it into ash. Then he leaned arms on the sill and stared over moonlit courtyards, where men of 20 banners slept in uneasy proximity. He wondered which passion might flare first once those hosts tramped home. Old feuds rekindled in the marches, seething Lannister pride struck to the quick by his own deed, or the slow-burning ire of Robert Baratheon learning to live without the dream of a rescue that would have crowned him. Banners drooped limp in still air. Ovens in the ruins' makeshift kitchens exhaled thin spirals of smoke. Peace smelled of soot and horse piss. Jaime rested his brow on cool stone and closed his eyes, asking the night what mask he should choose, and whether any mask could outlast the next storm. Far below, in the great hall's shadowed antechamber, Ned Stark sat with elbows on a trestle table, its surface scarred by ages of feasts and fights, and listened to the steady breathing of his sister. Lyanna slept on a low pallet ringed by candles whose tallow had pooled around their bases. Her fever had receded under the maester's snowbearer draught. Color crept back into her lips. She dreamt, he thought. Her lashes fluttered now and then, as though winter roses drifted across their edges. He pressed the heel of his hand to his own eyes. It had taken every measured word and the promise of passage rites to bring her safely through the gates, and still fear gnawed that some stray malady would strike, or that Robert's temper would reignite and demand tribute of blood. Footsteps approached, muffled on rushes. Ned lifted his head to see Jon Arryn, candle in hand, face grave yet soft with concern. The Lord of the Aerys lowered himself onto the bench opposite. "She will mend," the older man said quietly. "The maester is confident." "I will not rest until Winterfell's hearth warms her," Ned murmured. Arryn nodded. "The king, your new king, has ordered an escort of 200 to see you north once the council ends." Ned's fingers tightened around the cup before him. "I thank him, yet even 1,000 lances cannot mend what pride might damage." He thought of Robert pacing like a caged bull earlier, refusing wine, refusing consolation. Lyanna's truth wounded him more keenly than any blade. "Truth often bleeds," Arryn said. He blew out his candle, leaving theirs alone to stutter. "Robert must learn to bear the weight of humiliation as you bear the weight of duty. One day he may find doing so is the very root of honor." Ned gazed at his sister's soft breathing. "Honor feels heavy tonight, and tomorrow it will feel heavier," Arryn replied, standing. "But you are your father's son." He placed a reassuring hand on Ned's shoulder before gliding into the corridor that led back toward guest chambers where the Vale retinue slept. Ned remained, listening to the hall's timbers creak. Somewhere outside, a frog croaked in puddles left by last week's rain, stubborn life among ruins. He took Lyanna's hand and whispered old lullaby words that once echoed through Winterfell's nursery, words his mother had sung when branched shadows frightened them. Lyanna stirred but did not wake. Ned closed his eyes, letting the song steady his pulse. In a circular room at the top of Harrenhal's Tower of Dread, a name that felt ill-suited since the pyres of Aegon the Conqueror had half-melted its stones, Varys the Spider arranged figures on a small Sivas board. The pieces were carved of ivory and jade, their glint muted by a single brazier. Across the table sat Prince Oberyn Martell, lean fingers drumming a pattern near the sand-sworn cavalry piece he had yet to move. "You play dragons dangerously, my prince," Varys observed, bald head reflecting firelight. "Dangerous dragons are the only dragons worth fearing," Oberyn answered, sliding the cavalry into a flanking position. "Your elephant threatens my fortification. My dragon threatens your king. A pleasant symmetry." Varys tapped a fingertip to his lips, then advanced a heavy horse to interpose. "Symmetry can shatter with a single miscalculation. As in war, so in Sivas." The prince laughed softly. "War seldom grants one the leisure to ponder patterns." "Indeed," Varys's smile was thin as parchment. "I find, however, that patterns ponder us, whether we note them or no. Consider today's accords. Wildfire dismantled, a school raised in these halls to teach lantern craft, a northern girl free to choose her fate. One might spy a pattern of trust. Or a temporary truce while daggers sharpen," Oberyn countered. He lifted his dragon piece, examined its jade wings. "Trust is brittle where pride remains unbowed." Varys inclined his head. "Which is why the Whisperer's work is never finished." He moved a spearman, and with a brisk flick toppled Oberyn's elephant. "Check." The prince studied the board, lips pursed, then pushed back his chair. "I concede tonight. My thoughts scatter." He rose, stretching. "I sail for Sunspear at dawn to placate my brother. He distrusts peace signed in a charnel hall." Varys gestured graciously. "Give my regards to Prince Doran. And remember, peace is but a quiet between heartbeats. One must guard it if one wishes to hear the next." Oberyn bowed in flamboyant irony, cloak swirling, and strode away. Varys replaced the pieces, each click of ivory echoing faint in the cavernous tower. Once the board stood pristine, he opened a small ledger, dipped quill, and wrote a single line. The field resets. Dragons dormant, stags wounded, lions crouched. He sanded the ink, closed the book, and banked the brazier low. When he slipped from the room, the Syvas table gleamed alone, awaiting the next game. On Dragonstone, squalls lashed the castle walls, rattling shutters like dice in a cup. In the queen's chamber, Riella lay dozing, but her newborn daughter stirred, fists unfurling from linen wraps. A low wail built in the child's belly, gaining strength. A wet nurse moved swiftly to offer comfort. Light from the hearth caught in the baby's lilac eyes, eyes that belonged as much to the ancient past as to the uncertain future. Ser Arthur Dane stood at the threshold, armor doffed, damp hair plastered to brow. Lightning outlined his silhouette. He watched the nurse settle the infant, then padded to the bedside. Riella blinked up, lips parting in faint smile. "She has your mouth," Dane whispered, gazing at the swaddled bundle. "My will, I hope," Riella murmured, brushing a finger along the baby's cheek. "She arrives in a gentler realm than her brothers did, if the gods are kind." Dane did not speak of the councils or scrolls, the fragile promises inked in red wax. Instead, he took Riella's hand and bowed his head. "She is loved. That will shield her better than steel." The queen's eyelids drooped. Dane stepped back to the doorway, where a page waited with a lantern. Outside, gale-driven rain rattled against leaded panes. Yet in the cradle the child now slept, storm's thinning echoes lulling her. Southwest along the oaken-scented river road, Tywin Lannister's column rolled through late spring drizzle. The lion banners were furled, a gesture of courtesy, some said, though more likely of strategy. Tywin rode at the van, Brightor's replacement sword hanging at his side. Beside him clopped Maester Crelin, scribbling down tallies read from dripping scrolls. "Gold shipments arrive in 3 weeks," Crelin droned. "The Iron Bank extends favorable terms, 8% over 7 years, predicated upon stabilization of crown revenues." Tywin half listened. His mind wandered to Harrenhal's soot-flecked hall, to Rhaegar's measured tone. Peace seemed poised on the edge of a blade. Prod it wrong and edges would wet themselves anew. At the rear of the procession, Jaime and 30 household knights rode quiet, banners hidden, their allegiance to crown or rock not yet hammered into final shape. Tywin turned to the maester, composed letters to the wardens, congratulate Stark on his sister's recovery, commend Baratheon for forbearance, then remind them both that roads, holds, and harbors still wait for repair, and that Lannisport's foundries stand ready to supply needs at fair market cost. Fair being a word he alone would define. A small smile ghosted Crelin's lips as ink scratched parchment. Profit grew best in soil turned soft by war. 3 weeks later, King's Landing greeted its new ruler with a coronation repeated, this time beneath clear sky, not amid wildfire residue. Rhaegar knelt before the High Septon outside the half-repaired September of Baelor, ruby coronet upon unbound silver-gold hair. Common folk filled the plaza, their cheers tentative at first, then swelling when loaves of barley bread were distributed and casks of sweet ale tapped gratis. Children climbed shoulders to glimpse the moment a dragon prince became king by right and not merely desperation. Elia Martell stood at his side, Aegon on her hip, Rhaenys clutching her skirts. When the Septon anointed Rhaegar's brow with holy oil, sunlight struck the droplets, scattering rainbows. Bells rang, not through secret fuses, but by willing hands high above, their notes bright rather than foreboding. Across the crowd Jaime saw broad, rigid shoulders relax, scars of terror eased by simple ceremony. Yet not all eyes shone with hope. On a balcony of the Red Keep, Robert Baratheon watched, tunic stretched taut over thickening chest, flagon in hand. Connington at his elbow kept silent. When the crowd roared Rhaegar's name, Robert's knuckles whitened around the flagon. He drank deep, wiped froth from his mustache. "Magnificent," Connington offered, chin tilting toward the dais. Robert grunted. Magnificent rubies, perhaps. We'll see how long they dazzle. He glanced across the throng, seeking Stark banners. Absent, already gone north. A crown cannot mend a broken heart, nor a broken promise. Cunnington sighed. Nor can resentment mend it. Robert's gaze flicked to the king's children. He has heirs aplenty now. Let him keep his dragon brood. I'll find solace elsewhere. Cunnington hoped he meant in rebuilding Storm's End, not in casks of arbor gold, but said nothing. Months unfurled. Harrenhal's melted curtain walls sprouted scaffolding as masons labored, guided by plans drawn by master builders from Volantis who claimed they could fuse ancient stone with modern grace. The school took shape. Forged chimneys pierced the sky. Lecture halls echoed with the clank of prototype lanterns that burned bright without exploding. Alchemists, freed from secret catacombs, joined tinkerers and glassblowers under watchful nights. Some snarled that their arcane dignity was sullied by artisans' prattle, yet others found satisfaction forging light rather than dread. In the Red Keep, a reconstituted council convened. Jon Arryn accepted the hand's chain, thin links of silver flanked by heavier steel, for he insisted the badge remind him toil outweighed privilege. Newly sworn master of coin Peter Baelish fluttered about ledger columns like a hawk among sparrows, while Varys fed whispers of bandit unrest along the Duskendale road. Pycelle, increasingly forgetful, remained for now. Rhaegar lacked the heart to displace another graybeard so soon, but younger maesters visited often, armed with ledgers and salves both. Queen Elia, though weary, engaged in audiences, hearing petitioners from river hamlets still charred. She sent Tyrell wagons of saffron north to Winterfell as a gift for Lyanna's unborn child. The novelty delighted northern cooks, who fashioned sweet-spiced oats to tempt the recovering lady's appetite. Riella, from Dragonstone, dispatched ravens praising her son's measured rule and hinting at a desire to visit the court with baby Daenerys once seas calmed. Jaime, now white-cloaked anew, drilled recruits beneath the Red Keep's towers. He forbade the old rotation of idle guardsmen lounging at dice. Sparring dummies carved as common thieves shared space with targets painted as nobles, to remind shields that danger wears every face. The small folk watching from parapets whispered that the Kingslayer trained men to slay again, but others noticed he spoke gently to squires, corrected stances with patience, and laughed more readily than before. At dusk Jaime often found himself striding the ramparts, gazing west toward hills that hid Casterly Rock, wondering whether the distance between Lion and Dragon's Hand coup. LD ever close. Far to the northwest, on the frosted barrows of Winterfell, Ned Stark held his newborn nephew high so Lyanna could see from her pillow. The babe had her dark hair, but eyes still newborn blue, might yet shift to the Stark gray or the Targaryen violet. They had named him Jon, for Jon Arryn, whose guidance had steadied lord and lady alike. Robb toddled nearby, Eddard's own son by Catelyn Tully, clutching a wooden direwolf. Snow pattered quietly against the shutters, yet inside the great chamber warmth glowed. Lyanna's cough had faded. Color graced her cheeks. She thanked Ned for the curls of steam rising from willow bark tea, smiled at her brother's shy pride. In the yard below, Blackfish Brynden Tully drilled northern men on spear formations. Winterfell would not forget how to fight even in peace. But inside, for a moment, swords hung quiet. Catelyn stroked the babe's tiny fist, feeling its fierce grip. Fatherhood the Builder never saw such a haul, she whispered, meaning the simple miracle of new life, though Ned thought her words equally apt for the keep itself. Ancient walls built to endure. That night Ned wrote to the king, "Your nephew Jon thrives beneath snows that know not dragonfire. May this letter find your court still lit by honest lanterns." He sealed it with gray wax stamped by the direwolf, sent it south on a white raven. Then he returned to the nursery and sat by the hearth, content to watch flames that burned merely for heat, not war. On Pike, Balon Greyjoy stood atop Sea Tower's windswept parapet, smelling storms roll in from the sunset sea. Ravens brought word of dragons, stags, and lions mired in courtesies. He felt scorn rise like bile, while dragons preened beneath their new crown and river fools rebuilt charred hovels. the Ironborn sharpened axes and told tales of the old way. Balan's brother Euron, wandering, had sent a gift. A length of pale, splintered horn said to have slain some leviathan of the far sea. Balan traced its ridges and imagined those ridges scraping hulls of Greenland ships. Soon he promised the waves. Soon enough the Kraken would test the North's brand new peace. East of the narrow sea, in a shaded courtyard of Illyrio's manse, young Viserys Targaryen sulked while his sister chased moths through lemon trees. Illyrio fanned himself and chuckled. "Patience, my prince," he crooned, in tones that made the title almost a jest. "Your cousin sits a newly minted throne, but thrones may tarnish. Opportunity blooms after." Viserys kicked dust. "He should send for us. We are blood." "Blood diluted by politics," Illyrio murmured. "Best to grow strong in exile until Westeros tires of its fresh king." He rose, swept powdered sugar from his silks. "Come. Lessons of history wait, and merchants from Karth bring sweet dragon figurines to amuse your sister." Daenerys babbled, chasing a yellow moth whose wings glowed like coin. Sunlight slanted through lattice, touching her hair with silver. Across the seas her half-brother ruled, forging peace from ashes. Yet beneath her tiny ribs beat a heart that might one day demand its own song. In a damp cellar beneath King's Landing street of flour sacks, a grease-stained man known only as Ralph the Plunger poured bitter beer for half a dozen guild thieves. They spoke in low voices of bandits north of Duskendale, of Greyjoy longships sighted near Cape Kraken, of rumors that the king would raise taxes on imported salts to fund harbor repair. But one tale froze the froth in every mug, a whisper that wildfire casks, long hidden in forgotten niches, still slept beneath Rhaenys' hill, unmarked, unmonitored. If a man could find but one and threaten the crown with it, wealth might pour like honey. Ralph spat. "The Kingslayer'll gut any who try." A lean rat-faced fellow grinned, showing 3 teeth. "Kingslayer's busy drilling, and rats scurry where knights won't stoop." His hand caressed the hilt of a narrow dirk. Somewhere beyond the shutters, bells from the September told sunset, but those in the cellar heard only opportunity. That same sunset found Jaime walking the length of Blackwater Bay's refurbished docks. Gulls rode thermal drafts. Fisherfolk mended nets, pausing to bow or spit according to their opinions. Near the pier's end he found Rhaegar gazing toward Dragonstone, cloak fluttering. 7 months, the king mused, not turning. 7 months since that night. I measure each dawn after by how few embers glow in the dark. Jaime folded arms. Fewer, perhaps, yet embers can hide beneath ash. Rhaegar glanced over, tired smile creasing. Lyanna sends word her boy grows strong. Elia and I send gifts north. A harp small enough for a child's grasp. Mayhaps he will pluck kinder tunes than his father. He canted his head. You will ride with me to Dorne next moon, escorting my mother and infant sister. Peace must be shown as more than parchment. Jaime inclined his head. As you command. They stood a while in silence, watching a barge drift upriver bearing freshly hewn beams. City walls glittered where new stone replaced blackened sections. Swallows darted through cranes' lattice. The sun set behind the distant hills, dipping the horizon in copper. I will never escape my father's shadow, Jaime said, the confession slipping free before caution caught it. Nor the crown of guilt they'll write in songs. Rhaegar's voice was quiet. Songs serve memory, not truth. He placed a hand on Jaime's pauldron. History's first draft is inked in rumor, but each day lived rewrites the script. Walk your path straight, Ser Jaime, and one dawn the bards may tire of croaking the old refrain. Jaime studied the river's bronze ripples. If not, he said, I will simply outlive them. Rhaegar laughed softly, squeezed his shoulder, and turned back toward the keep where torches winked to life along ramparts. Jaime watched the king's silhouette recede, aware that any crown sat over churning fires of doubt. He touched the white cloak draped from his shoulders, felt its weight, and for the first time did not think of masks, but of a shield. One final raven left Harrenhal that night, circle marking the towers before winging east. It bore Bran Stark's last green dream scribble, a charcoal sketch of a dire wolf walking a field of blue flowers beneath twin suns. The note to accompany it read, simply, "Storms pass. Seeds remain." Maester Luwin frowned at the cryptic draft, but Ned Stark smiled, recognizing the shape of hope growing among children of ice and fire both. And so the realm, scarred but breathing, entered a season of uneasy renewal. Lanterns glowed along cobbled lanes where once green flame prowled. Smiths hammered plowshares from rusted mail. Septons sang prayers for a harvest none knew would thrive. Peace walked in borrowed boots, every footfall echoing on thin glass, yet for the moment the glass held. Beyond the wall the wind carried colder omens. In black woods unknown to lords or kings, a single flake of snow spiraled through summer's fading air, landed on a withered leaf, and did not melt. But that tale waited in shadows. For now, in courts and keeps, laughter dared return, children dared chase moths, and old wounds dared knit. Under the same tentative stars, Bran Stark dreamt of rivers that never froze and dragons that never burned, and woke smiling. Not because he believed such dreams would come true unchallenged, but because at last he knew that even the smallest voice, carried by roots and ravens, could bend the course of storms.